Doing a sound test here. Can everybody hear me? Let me know in the chat, please. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I'm your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this October 15th, 2024. Tonight we've got a brand new, never covered before topic with a brand new guest. The subject matter is astrology. I think it's a confusing arena for a lot of people. Depending upon your points of view, you might see it as superstitious, you might see it as evil, or you might see it as fascinating. I take the third category on that one, and tonight we are going to dive in and find out why. You don't want to miss this one. More to come tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. I'm very excited to be here with you tonight to share with you about the various things that we talk about. And tonight it is a new subject, as I said earlier, astrology. We've never covered it before, although I have to say my students are no stranger to astrology. We've been talking about it for about the last 6 months or so. I'm covering it aspect by aspect, configuration by configuration, painstakingly go through the details of understanding the natal chart. So my students are becoming old pros at this subject, but maybe you're not. So tonight we're going to talk about it. And that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes this show interesting, is that we dive right into whatever fascinating subjects are out there regarding the paranormal, the mystical, the metaphysical, the spiritual, the religious, the philosophical, you name it, we cover it. And we cannot do it without your support. So remember, this show is fully church sponsored. And we need your support to keep it going and make it better. So there's a good big QR code up there on the screen, the top left corner if you are on the vertical output, and if you're looking at it on your smart TV, or if you've got it in horizontal mode, you'll see it on the bottom right. Just click that, and we could really use a monthly pledge to support the church that supports the show. Okay, and that will help the show continue to be able to bring to you this wonderful, entertaining, educational programming. I want to also give a big thanks to all of our wonderful moderators out there who keep the chat safe and are here for every production, every live feed, regardless of the time. For some of them, it is well past their bedtimes, but they do it anyway, and we are greatly appreciative of that, because we couldn't really do this without them. I can't do all this engineering and moderate and keep all those trolls off our feeds. It's not possible, but thanks to them, we can give you a pretty safe place to come and ask your questions. Remember, there is no question that is a bad question. The only bad question is one that is not asked. And that's what this show's here, to give you a safe space to be able to talk about what's on your mind and to ask questions about things that maybe your pastor's not talking about, or your spiritual advisor, or maybe you just don't know about it and you want to know more, this is the show for you. Jamie, my co-host, is not with us tonight, but we do have Jamie Wolf, not with us in the studio tonight, but we do have her here on Zoom. So how you doing tonight, Jamie?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, embarrassed to say I fought some poison sumac and lost. It's covering my palms and my wrists. It's pretty painful and burning. So
it's a miserable
appreciate
thing.
You let me stay home. Yeah.
You don't need to be driving
calamine lotion and
you don't need to be driving 2 hours with that on your palms.
Taking Zyrtec and it's
we want you to have a good grip on that steering
nasty.
wheel when you're driving up here in these crazy roads. You know what I mean?
Driving with my knees, it hurts to even grab a pen.
I can imagine. I've had it, so I know what you're going through, and it's not a pleasant experience. No, it's not.
No, my fault.
I've never had it on both, but I've had it on one, and it's not. I mean, God, it's awful. It's awful. So we're not going to do our normal liturgical libations, but I do have a fantastic glass of Bordeaux here from the remnants of dinner. So I am still able to celebrate with those of you who like that segment of the show. We're just not going to open a scotch tonight. Because
I have a bourbon and apple cider.
Okay, well, there you go. Cheers to you. I actually drink more wine than I drink whiskey, to be honest. I'm sure people probably think of me as a whiskey drinker, but I'm actually really a wine drinker. I drink wine practically with every meal. And it's usually French. I love my Burgundies and I love my Bordeauxs. Okay, so also joining us on Zoom, we have the wonderful Father Chris, all the way from Australia. How you doing tonight, Father?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I've got a good day today because after the show I'm flying to Melbourne to go and stay with Father Walter. So,
okay, gonna have some fun.
Yeah,
give him our best.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out that because if it worked out differently, I would have been there. He could have been with me on the show, but we had to go in the afternoon. So but we're looking forward to that very much.
Maybe we can do it at some time in the future. You never know.
Yeah.
Work it out. Or maybe you can come here and then you can sit between us. Like when Tracy does, we have that third person in studio. Better. Yeah, we could do that. That could be fun. And then we can drink some really good scotch all night long. Maybe we'll make it like a longer show. Have an after show or something like that.
Well, like you, I also drink more wine than I do whiskey, which is probably a very good thing for my liver.
Yes, it's actually better for you.
And so I've just taken delivery of a Beaujolais, in fact, which is not my normal tipple, but it was a 94 rated, and it was going for. I've got a wine buyer who gets these deals. It was going for $25 a bottle, so I ordered a case.
Thank you, James, for liking the stream. Thank you. I have a club. People on the network know about it because I'll always post various selections from there. I have a club that ships me in wine directly from France, from these producers that typically you can't get in the United States of America. They're not exported by the larger distributors. So it's basically a kind of like a wine direct kind of procedure where this company, this club goes out, finds wines in France that Americans don't know about, but they're these wonderful treasures in France. And then they put them into this club and they buy in bulk, so they get fairly good prices on them that they can pass along to us. So there's really not a lot of markup there. It's actually very well. I mean, let me just put it this way. Through the club, I can be drinking what would be probably about an $80 or $90 bottle of Burgundy for about 40 to 50. So it's a big,
that's the advantage.
It is the advantage.
This guy's been, he went from one company to another, but I went with him because he just knows what I like, and I couldn't be bothered explaining it again to somebody new, and I like him. And then would you believe it? I've moved to a suburb of Sydney, and I was chatting to him on the phone, and he says, "That's where I live." So now we're going to meet up.
There you go. I mean, Australia's got some great wines too. I drink a lot of Burgundy because it's
the Shiraz is amazing.
Oh yeah, Shiraz.
Australian Shiraz is really good, and Cab Sauv. You get some real heavy ones from the Barossa. They're really nice.
Oh yeah, there's some great ones down there. I drink a lot of Burgundy. My family is actually, my ancestry is from Burgundy. I like the limestone. I like what that minerality does to the wine. It's we have some great Pinot Noirs in the U.S., but they don't taste anything like Burgundy because we don't have that terroir that really creates what makes Burgundy so special. And of course, it's always in very small quantities. So it tends to be quite expensive, but this club is able to usually get me some really good ones for a very reasonable rate. So I've gotten a little spoiled by it, because I'll go and I'll buy, a $50 bottle here. And it's like, this isn't anywhere near as good as the other one, because it's like basically it's like basically a markup, where the other ones are almost like 50% off when you consider the variation in quality. So I love my little club.
Growing up in England, the French used to send us all the rubbish wine, So
yeah. Well, they do to us too.
And then you go to France, and they've got some like tap hose, on the side of a vineyard, a hose where you can get wine out of it.
Yes.
And it's like 8 times better than anything you'd buy in a bottle in England. It costs about $2 to fill up a bottle.
It's crazy what the French do. They're really a little bit sneaky about this, because I'll tell you, there's another thing that we've done for the holidays. Although now I found a more local cheese distributor here in town, in Atlanta, that can get all of these cheeses. Typically these cheeses that you can't get in the U.S., they can get them and then I can go there and get them. So it's much better to just go directly there. But before I knew about this place, I would go and get my cheese shipped in from Paris, usually about 3 or 4 times every Christmas season. And sometimes they would have these baskets for the holidays where they would bring you a bottle. They put a bottle of wine in there, with the cheese. And so we did an earlier one where the Beaujolais Nouveaux were out. And for those of you who don't know, Beaujolais Nouveau is not quite like a standard Beaujolais. It's basically, if it's a very young wine that comes out every, in the fall, and it's typically, you don't age it. You don't hold it very long. It doesn't last very long. You basically, when you get it, you drink it. Okay. And so I don't remember which vineyard it was, but we would do this Beaujolais tasting, and we would probably get like the top 3 that we could get around here. And we would drink them with cheese from France, which was a fun little tradition to do. So one year they sent us a bottle, and it was a bottle that was from the exact same vineyard, but it looked very different than the one that we would get here, or whatever's like distributed out to the United States. And so we opened the one that we purchased here in the US and drank it, and was like, okay, not the best Beaujolais Nouveau, maybe not the best year for it, but it was drinkable enough. So we finished it. And then we needed more, so we opened up the one from France. Same vineyard, same grapes, same vintage of Beaujolais Nouveau. Nowhere near the same taste. And the quality of that one from France was outstanding in comparison to the one that they were sending to us. So they definitely send us the shit. That's why you gotta go with these wine directs, these clubs that can get you the wine directly from the vineyards, and then just have them bring you the wine instead of going through the whole exportation process, which
they're laughing at you as they're packing it in the box.
I know. Yeah, I know, right? I know. But yeah, when you taste what the wine that they keep for themselves, you'll see. I mean, it's, in my opinion, I still say, and I've loved wine from all over the world. I think Argentina and Chile produce some fantastic wines right now. And I'd say Chile is doing better than Napa Valley, in my opinion. However, I've tasted wine everywhere. I love it everywhere, but there's just something about Burgundy and Bordeaux that no one can duplicate. There's nothing quite like it, and it will always be. And the same thing with champagne. I
was amazed at
sparkling wines.
I was amazed at the scale of the vineyards in California. I mean, I drove from LA to Vegas, and then I eventually drove from San Fran back down to LA.
Yeah,
and the size the vineyards here are nowhere near that size. Even though Australia produces quite a lot, really, considering the size of the industry here.
Well, Napa is one of I think the second largest producers, honestly. But the thing is, we if it weren't for, we have to give some thanks to Napa, because the French would not have grapes today if it weren't for Napa, because that virus came through and eradicated all the French vineyards. I forget when that was, but
that was true in Australia too. Australia sent vines back to France.
Yeah, you know, and Napa did, and a lot of the grapes that they like, the Merlot, the Cabernet, Sauvignon, primary grapes for Bordeaux, you know, were sent back, and they were able to recultivate. It's really, I mean, the grape's important, but it's where the grape is grown, not so much where its seed comes from. You know, I get a kick out of these, you know, these tobacco companies that say it's Cuban seed tobacco. It's, well, whoop-de-doo. Who gives a shit? It's not where the seed's from. It's where the soils that it's growing in. That's where it matters.
If I grow a bunch of grapes, Merlot grapes, in a plant pot at home, it's not going to taste that good.
No, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So seeds don't matter. What matters is soil when it comes to winemaking. So, definitely check out. It's called. What's the name of the company? I can't remember off the top of my head. I've been going.
Just to remind people, we're not sponsored.
No, this is not a sponsor. I do this out of the kindness of my heart, because I really do believe in companies that do good things. You know, I like positive capitalism. I know I'm very hard on capitalism, but I like positive. I like the entrepreneurial spirit, where people, you know, have a passion about something, and the market allows them to be able to make a lifestyle out of this that brings wonderful experience to people. This is what I like. I don't like corporatism, though. You know, that's where it goes south, and that's why, you know, I can use this small little company and get these great wines directly from France and pay less than going to some freaking corporatized exportation system that, you know, exploits me. So, you know, it's got its bad sides. We also have Brandon Milam calling from Tennessee. How you doing?
I'm a lot better than what I was.
Yeah, you had that little
week.
problem, so you're recovered now, right?
Just about, yes. I can actually hear. It's amazing.
A double ear infection. I mean, come on, man. You know?
And I don't have alcohol. I have some weird concoction of tea and half a bottle of honey. So it's working.
That's really good. And if you add a little, I'm not kidding. I'm not joking about this one. If you add whiskey to that, and you know, you should be able to get, I mean, well, no, you shouldn't, because even though you guys produce whiskey, you don't let your own people drink it. I mean, all these dry counties and everything, what the hell's going on out there? You know, I don't understand that. That would be like France. That would be like Bordeaux and Burgundy producing all this wonderful wine, but no one in Burgundy or Bordeaux can drink it. We got to be dry. I mean, it's ridiculous nonsense. It is bonkers, but that's the way it is. And, you can't even drink. I mean, actually, I want to say where Jack Daniels is, it's a dry county, and it's like, what the hell's going on here? You know, this is just the madness of the Bible Belt. We talk about it often on this show. We complain about it often on this show. But anyway, if you can get yourself some whiskey, bourbon preferably, but Tennessee whiskey will do just fine, and put that in there with that, and then use some bergamot. You know, get some like Earl Grey, and put that all, mix that all in, and that will literally draw that infections out and get you know, help you get rid of sore throats and stuff like that. So try that next time you get sick, and I guarantee you're gonna be like, oh my God, I can't believe how better I feel. And you don't have to put a lot, like, you're literally, I mean, you don't want to make it a cocktail. You want to just put a few tablespoons of whiskey in there. It just helps draw out the toxins that get stuck in the throat and make you sick. So let's get started tonight with questions from the ether.
So the first question was actually one that was asked on the previous show, but we didn't get to it.
Okay.
It's from Michelle on Facebook. She asked, what is inside Annabelle, or Robert the doll?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that. Yeah, well, I mean, if you recall from last week's show, I actually made it a point to say that there is nothing inside them. You know, the dolls do not become possessed, and neither do people become possessed by something going inside them. This idea of a spirit inhabiting them is an antiquated notion. It's not actually what's happening. What's happening is that we are lowering ourselves to the vibrational frequency of these malevolent forces in which we start to take on the characteristics. In other words, we sort of inhabit them. It's the other way around. So demonic possession is actually you possessing the demon instead of the demon possessing you. That's hard for people to fathom, but that's exactly what it is. And that's how all sin works. You take on the characteristics of the evil. It's no demon doing it. You're doing it. You're choosing to freely do it. This is why these, ridiculous lawsuits. And I actually was asked to be a part of one once, where somebody was claiming to be, possessed by the demon when they killed someone or molested. I think it was a molestation case. It
was a molestation case.
Yeah. And they were trying to use that as a defense. And I'm saying, well, first of all, even if I did believe in traditional possession, I wouldn't help you. Second of all, it's not, there is absolutely no religious or metaphysical grounds that would justify this, because from the vantage point of how the Judeo-Christian worldview works, man is complicit in the evils that man does. He cannot blame Satan. Remember, I've said Satan's powerless to do anything. You give him power, usually through fear. That's where it starts. And then through gratification. Then that's how you continue to build the relationship into that. But the dolls are the same way. So a doll doesn't become possessed by an evil spirit. The doll takes on the characteristics of the person who loved it. So Robert the doll and Annabelle were both beloved toys at one time. And honestly, we've talked about Annabelle. I think that's a fabricated story. Robert the doll, I think, has a little bit more validity to it. I'm not, though, as experienced in all of the details on that particular case, so I don't know as much about Robert the doll to really just say definitively that it's authentic. Annabelle, I think, has been pretty much debunked as being
Robert the doll's in my neck of the woods.
Oh yeah. It's a toy that was loved and neglected and forgotten, and then the toy because love, as we said last week, love is literally creation. Love is life. Life is love. They are not different things or different realities. They're two sides of the same coin. So they might experience differently for us. Life might feel differently than love, and love might feel differently than life. But from the vantage point of this cosmos, of creation itself, of the nature of God, it's the one and the same thing. So for a child to love something, it gives it life. That love is life, and that creates life within the doll. But when it's neglected, it starts to become, well, the same way that a human being would be. It becomes traumatized, and that trauma creates malevolence, just like it does in people. What happens with, how many times you hear about these awful shootings where there's like people go postal or whatever, and then you go into you deep dive into their lives and you find out that there's all this trauma there. The trauma doesn't excuse it, but what it does show is that trauma is the gateway to malevolence, which is why you have to be very careful with it. And
a lot of it's sexual abuse.
Yeah, usually, unfortunately. Yeah. And that's what we see, and that's a question I have to ask a lot. It's kind of an uncomfortable question, but it's one we have to ask. Yeah, because a lot of times...
Well, it's why the demonic is... The archetype of the demonic in film and in novel and poetic form is often deeply associated with eroticism.
Right.
Seduction to the devil, right? But you said a word that's really important, Bishop. You said becoming. If you think about the scriptures, the revelation of God, it's about becoming. Mm-hmm. We all know that adage, beware of your habits. They'll be, in other words, if you start to think negatively all the time and pessimistically, and we're all going to hell in a handcart, then that becomes your reality. You create a hell for yourself.
You do.
We talk about God the Son becoming flesh, or taking on sin that we might be sinless. And the whole idea of actually the second most read book in history, apart from the Bible, is the Imitation of Christ by Thomas Becket.
Oh,
Thomas
yes.
Becket? No.
No, I don't know.
Thomas Kempis. Thomas
Yes,
Kempis.
yes.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, the Imitation of Christ, that's all about encouraging people in their daily meditation, thinking. By the way, I'm not saying I conquered this.
Thank you, Anthony.
But it's about becoming, and in a way, if we are in fact supposed, our aim is to be the imitation of Christ because he's God in the flesh, and that's the closest we've got. And if we, that's why I used to think of these things as kind of pointless or what have you, but no, they're not. When people, pray the rosary all the time, when people have icons around their house, the point is not to have pretty pictures or things you like to fiddle with, but actually, things that aid you in becoming essentially sinless, which is what you'll be in the eternal realm.
Well, that's the point.
And you
of
also
it.
said
that's the point.
and you also said that the devil can't make you do things. That's because the devil is immaterial. He is spirit. He's not material. So the only way that the will of the, if you want to call it the corruption of the devil can be instantiated in time and space is if you do it. Mm-hmm. And for that, there's no defense on a legal basis.
No. And that's the part that I think the horror films have led people astray with, because unfortunately, most people's experience with the devil is going to be through pop culture. And, Hollywood wants to create the image of something that's a good story. And of course, this monster under your bed that can steal your soul and take it to hell is a great story. It's a great plot point when you're telling a fiction. But when you're talking about theology, it goes in completely the opposite direction. It's actually really bad theology, and it's not helpful. It does not help people to understand what's really going on. The devil doesn't exist the way we think he does. Is the devil real? Yes. But is he a monster that's lurking, trying to destroy you, to steal your soul? No. The Jewish concept of Yetzer Hara, I highly recommend. We don't have time tonight to talk about it. We've talked about it before in this show, but I would highly recommend that you research how
he works on your weaknesses.
Yes.
And so if you want to be strong against the devil, then that's the whole point of personal reflection. Having a spiritual director is the best way to do this.
It is.
You have to, if you've got a walled city, you want to look at where the weakest point is and strengthen it. And that's exactly what you do with your own soul.
That's what the sacraments are actually doing. I mean, that's the point.
Often the weakest point is our erotic desires, which they're not evil things, but they're things that can be easily corrupted because they're powerful urges. But that's not true for everybody. For some people, it's, power, influence, money. Maybe it's all of them. But the point of self-reflection isn't just to go, oh, I'm terrible, and whip ourselves like we're puritanical.
Well, I would say actually power.
Where can I strengthen?
I would say power seeking honestly is basically just rudimentary sexual domination. Is really just another variation of it.
They're not separate.
Well, because, obviously you can't go around raping people without ending up in jail or dead. Mm-hmm. So why not rape people financially? Why not rape people through other gratifying means and do it in a way that the law doesn't have any recourse for? And that's what I think a lot of these people do, which is why you find sometimes these people that are these really insufferable types that are power hungry politicians and everything. I mean, it's why they're so creepy, because I think in a world where you could get away with it, they would be all rapists. And I think sometimes they are. But it's basically, I mean, they've done so many studies on this. Tracy and I've talked extensively on it. I researched it a lot when I was in college. There's so many studies that have shown that rape is only about power. The sex is just the vehicle through which they accomplish it. There were one of these interesting studies, I think it was Saudi Arabia, I'm almost positive it was, where rape is punished by removal of the genitalia. And you know what happened? You'd think that, well, that'll stop them, right? No,
they use something else.
They used blunt instruments. They still did it. So it doesn't. The facilitation is not sexuality. The facilitation is domination, and that is, of course, demonic. Because, the whole point of Scripture, the whole point of the life of Jesus Christ is to serve, not to be served. So power is irrelevant. Power seeking is completely irrelevant to a true Christian, and this is where it gets
to go back to the becoming trope. Philippians 2.
Yeah.
The whole point was that Christ, who is God incarnate and perfect, becomes nothing. Because what he seeks to become is less than nothing, a zero.
Yeah, less than nothing.
And that pursuit is why he's highly exalted.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And that's our lives. And in this life, a lot of people are depressed because they think no one recognizes my genius or nobody appreciates me or maybe genuinely they feel disaffected and unloved.
Yeah.
Well, the greatest man that ever lived felt all those things and was all those things to the point of death on a cross. And so that's not a pointless life. It's the opposite.
It is, absolutely. So there you go. So no, there's nothing inside Robert the doll or Annabelle or Peggy or any of them. I mean, it's just parts of ourselves that are lost that become reflected in these effigies, as we talked about last week. So I encourage anybody that doesn't understand what I'm talking about to go back and listen to last week's show so you can get the real in-depth background on it. But to clarify the question, no, we have to make a point to say there is nothing in the possessed doll. Possession is not something that enters into you. Possession is you entering into something evil. You're the one. You're the possessor. You're the possessor. That's the part that people don't want to accept. All right, Brandon, what's our next question?
So the next question comes from April, and it kind of piggybacks onto the previous question in a bit. What is a Dybbuk? Is it equivalent to a demon?
Well, it depends on how you define and look at it. So let's look at it two ways. Let's look at it the way that we would deal with it in the paranormal field, and let's look at it in the way that its historical context exists. So a Dybbuk comes out of Jewish folklore. Okay, it's not even part of Judaism. In fact, most Orthodox Jews find it to be silliness. It would be the same thing as us like talking about the Arthurian legends. They're fascinating. They tell interesting archetypal stories, but we don't really think there was a Merlin, that did all this magic. It's that silly to them. So a Dybbuk is really not taken seriously by Orthodox rabbis. But there is folklore that developed over time, because always there's going to be superstitions. Okay. The uneducated, and remember, rabbis were the highly educated, but they were serving a populace of people who really couldn't afford to be educated over, the ancient world and whatnot. So superstition tends to come out of ignorance. When you don't have knowledge of something, when you're uninformed, you tend to make up things. Your brain and your imagination runs wild, and you start to see things or believe things that are not necessarily true. But there is the concept of a malevolent spirit that cannot move on. And this is pervasive through all cultures. So it's not just Judaism that had this. Every culture has the framework for an angry ghost. Buddhism even calls them very much angry ghosts or hungry ghosts. And in the West, ghosts have always been a part of our culture to a degree that, a lot of people don't really even question the fact that they can exist. And so basically a Dybbuk is just a ghost that's really, really pissed off. And out of Jewish folklore, they would be these things that could get attached to you and not leave you alone and make your life miserable until their unresolved business was taken care of. This evolved to around the 15th or 16th centuries when Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical system, was really developed into what it now is, which is basically the foundation to the Western mystery tradition. Comes out of ancient Jewish Merkabah mysticism, but it's its own thing now, where then Dybbuk started to be taken more seriously. But again, this is fringe, okay? Kabbalah is not something that all Orthodox rabbis practice. In fact, very few of them, if any of them, actually practice it. It's its own division. It's as much of a deviation as the Nicolaitan Church is in esoteric Christianity from the Roman Catholic Church at the Vatican. It's that much of a difference. They wouldn't see anything of themselves in us, even though we see all of ourselves in them. They do not reciprocate that feeling. This is very much the same thing here. Orthodox Judaism doesn't really have much use for it, but Kabbalah tradition says, well, we get it all from Judaism, okay? So Dybbuk's come out of that. So what it is a wrathful spirit, a spirit of a human being, not some, monster or demon in the Judeo-Christian sense. This is not a fallen angel. Judaism really doesn't have, again, a framework for that. That's, again, folklore stuff, fringe stuff, non-canonical stuff, like Enoch and whatnot. That sort of got big into the early Christian thinking, which is why we have them, but they don't. And so this is basically a spirit that died usually because they were unfaithful to the commandments, because Judaism is all about following the commandments and doing the best that you can to honor God. Okay. And if you honor God, you'll be taken well care of. In the ancient world, that meant that God gave you a good life. Today, a good afterlife. Okay. So very traditional in that sense. But they would also say, those that subscribe to this Dybbuk model, they would also say that people that do not live this life, or, things that happen where they are not ready to face the annihilation of their souls because they are, they weren't that great. They don't get an afterlife, because Judaism doesn't have a hell like we do. I mean, Sheol's still a thing, but I think in many, I don't want to speak for the Jewish people because there's so much variation here, but I think a standard understanding today is that if you're a faithful Jew, you'll go on to some kind of pleasant afterlife. It's not quite the Christian heaven, but it's pretty much a nice thing. And if you're not faithful, then it's Sheol. It's like the same. That's basically what that hasn't changed, which is hell, but it's not hell in punishment and damnation. It's just basically slow deterioration into kind of nothingness. And so Dybbuk's, when a spirit faces the fact that, oh my God, that's my reality, I can't go on to the afterlife, they might choose to latch on to people here. And then that doesn't bode well, as I've talked about. So now that's the background. That's the Jewish folklore Kabbalah position. But now let's talk about where this applies in the paranormal field. Okay, for an exorcist or a paranormal group to encounter. This is that fourth category of demons out of my model, the 4 categories of demons that we've talked endlessly about. To remind everybody, category 1 is fallen angels, category 2, elementals and primordials, category 3, created thought forms, tulpas, egregores, category 4, wrathful spirits. And so this is category 4. And that's all it is. So I think these Dybbuks became popular because, of course, Zach Bagans, Zach Bagans, the show that Ghost Adventures that we're on, bought the so-called Dybbuk box, and put it at the Haunted Museum. And that became sort of like infused into public consciousness to the point that all sorts of Dybbuk boxes started popping up. But let's be clear about this, okay? Jewish mystics do not put spirits in boxes and attach them there. That does not happen, okay? So the foundation of the Dybbuk box in and of itself, at least from its historical vantage point, I don't think is a valid history. And, hate me for it. I've been kicked off podcasts. I've been a podcast that loved me before hated me after this because I said that, and I still stand by it because it's the truth. I'm not going to lie to you. Okay. That's the truth. But I can tell you, Jamie and I have been to the museum several times, and there is definitely a presence around that box. Do I think it's a Dybbuk? Yeah. Have you seen the Dybbuk? So you've seen the Dybbuk box.
Yeah.
Did you feel anything from it? I would imagine you did.
Yeah, I think that obviously, they put it in perspex and all the rest of it.
Well, it is.
That's garbage. But
and they have scents in there that make it more, ethereal, I guess.
But I think that of all the things in the museum, that was the I'm not hypersensitive, but I am I have discernment when it comes to these things.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, a bit more practice maybe, but there certainly is something
unsettling, maybe
unnerving about it. Although it's hard for me to pass that, whether it was the Dybbuk box or the presence of all of these offerings that people have.
Well, there's that too. So I'm going to posit
that's also a problem.
It is a problem, and I'm going to posit because of what you just said. I'm going to posit that it's not actually a Dybbuk box. What it is an egregore box.
It's a thought form.
Yes, and it's because everyone has been putting their input and fear into it. Every time they go to the museum, there's
a lot of anxiety in that room.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I think the sadness and all that is basically the foundation to the story, which is, if I recall, a survivor of a concentration camp. Was it Jamie? Oh, Jamie.
I think so.
Jamie muted herself. You're back. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a Holocaust survivor ended up with it. I used to know the
That's
story.
That's what it was. Some kind of Holocaust survivor, something like that. And so that could very well be, again, trauma, just like a haunted doll. So here, people asked about, can it happen with inanimate objects? There you go. Doesn't even have to be a human effigy. That's what happened with this box. Okay, nobody put a demon or a Dybbuk in there. What it is a thought form that is built out of people's trauma and sadness and fear. And that just keeps getting reinforced every time people go to the museum, and just gets stronger and stronger. So yeah, now it is something to reckon with. It really is
You couldn't trap a demon in a box. They're not material.
No, you can't. You can't. I think that comes from the jinn. Honestly, I think it comes from the folklore of. Yeah, I think it comes from, and because Jewish folklore is not a far stretch from the Arab world. No. It's still Semitic culture. Those kinds of stories get continued on, and I think that's where, but there's no such thing as Dybbuk boxes in reality. And Dybbuks in reality are, yes. Do they exist from the vantage point of what we do? Yes, there are spirits that will not move on for various reasons. And then when a spirit doesn't move on, they degrade. As they degrade, they become malevolent. Because you know what happens? You know why they're like, why this is because base nature is malevolent. It's fallen world. So it doesn't go down to base nature of perfection. It goes down to the base nature of imperfection. So it gets weaker and then it loses itself into this kind of evil spirit. So yeah, it is an evil spirit. And I guess that's essentially what you could say a demon is, but it's not a fallen angel.
I think I'm right in saying that Jewish theology also, I think their basic point of view, which is why they think converts are ridiculous, are that only Jews can lose their salvation because the laws are only binding on them. Yeah. And so, So, I mean,
it's kind of like reverse fundamentalism.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They're like, don't convert. Are you mad?
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa, for liking the stream. Please, if you're out there, give us a like. That actually helps the stream, particularly on YouTube. Remember, this algorithm hates us. We talk about religious topics. YouTube doesn't like religious topics. They will not promote religious topics. So if you want this show to be successful and you don't want to donate to it yourself, one way you can help it is to give it a like. So please do so. That helps the algorithm.
Sonia in the chat was talking about a friend of hers was at the Haunted Museum and she was sending them Mickey taking emojis, and then she felt a punch in the stomach, and had to go to bed. Well, it just made me think of, they've got I can't remember the name of the doll, the one where, you have to say hello and goodbye.
That's
and
the
not
Peggy.
Say anything rude.
That's the Peggy, I think.
The Peggy
right?
doll, yeah,
yes.
that's it.
Peggy.
And of course,
it called Jamie a bitch.
Yeah, right.
She was right.
I don't hold with paying respect to something that is like that. And so now, this isn't me being full of bravado and all the rest of it, but there are things you can do to make yourself not a victim of these things. And so my decision was to bless that doll and say, if you don't like Jesus Christ, you can go to hell, sort of thing. And nothing happened to me. So there you go.
Yeah, I kind of took the same approach to it. I kind of find it humorous. It's more entertainment to me, but
I'm not adding my fear to it.
I don't have fear to give to it. If I had fear, I still wouldn't give it to it. I just don't feel fear like that. I feel unsettledness about people, but that's about the only the closest I get to fear. Spirituality does not scare me. All right, what's our next one, Brandon?
So our next question is for me. It's a little lengthy, so I'll try to make it quick. Basically, I was having some difficulty reconciling events in the Bible with your webinar's teaching of God being the creative principle. An example would be in 2 Kings 3, the prophet Elijah tells the kings of Israel, Judah, and Edom that God will deliver the Moabites into their hands. Long story short, the story ends with the Moabite king sacrificing his heir, and then an anger comes upon Israel, and they go home. So to my understanding, the patron deity of Moab was Chemosh. So is this saying that Chemosh beat God?
No. So first of all, to clarify, it's Elisha that this is talking about, not Elijah. And secondly, what it's demonstrating is that, or all it does tell us is that after that happened, they went home. They didn't stay to fight it out. So in a sense, you could say this is a good example of how humanity plays a fundamental role in its fate and outcome and destiny, that it's not healthy. I don't like when Christians act like it's all in God's hands. God's in control. No, he's given you control. Life is in your hands. Salvation's in his. And he gives you the tools but even that ultimately does come back to a choice that you have to make. As far as the work that was done to make it possible for us to enter into the kingdom of heaven from a Judeo-Christian theological standpoint. Yes, that is of course in God's hands, but no, it's not all in God's hands. He wants us to be participants, and he wants us to be actively involved in creation and to be stewards of it. Thank you, Melissa, again. The other point that I think that, not that I'm saying that this is what this particular passage is talking about, but it is a way that Christians can look at this story and understand it, is that Christ died on the cross, and that from a Christian standpoint, defeated Satan forever. But then why does Christian theology allow for people to still lose their salvation? Why, is going to hell something that is a possibility according to Christian theology? If Christ already defeated Satan, why is hell even a possibility? Because human beings still have to make a choice. They still have to participate. And so that doesn't mean Satan won. And after all, it's not like he reversed what the cross did. We reverse what the cross did when we refuse it. And this is just an example of how the Israelites could make their own decisions. And even though God would have supported them, they chose to back off. And that's what it's actually saying.
If you just think of it basically as a covenant, we know that there's a covenant between God and Israel.
Yeah.
We have the new covenant in Christ. Covenant is the easiest example of a covenant for us is a marriage. So you have a marriage between a man and a woman. And so there's a covenant that is entered into voluntarily, freely. If once married, one of the partners just says, "Well, that's it now. We're married, so I'm going to do nothing."
Yeah.
I'm in fact, not only am I going to do nothing, I'm going to do things that hurt you, damage you, affect you. Then in what way would that be a marriage? So. If the fundamental problem with a certain type of Protestant view that salvation once gained can't be lost is that it makes a mockery of what a covenant is, because a covenant is not a one-way affair; it's a two-way affair, and so that's how you can lose your salvation. It's not that God withdraws his offer. Is that you turn it down.
Well, even if someone goes to hell, and remember, the church has never said anyone's actually there. It will never rule in that way. It will just say it's a possibility. We know, because Jesus talked about it, that it exists. But we don't have any verification that anyone's actually there, other than the fact that we can infer from Jesus' words that there probably is. But we don't know who they are. We would never declare that this person's there. Even Judas himself has never been declared as being sort of an anti-saint and is in hell. So we have to always keep in mind that that does not mean that the devil wins just because people end up in hell. That even if a person were to go to hell, that does not mean the devil won. It means that we freely chose to give away the greatest gift that was ever shared with us. And that's all it means. And we have the freedom to do that because, see, I've said it so many times before, I don't think I can get it into people's heads sometimes. I'm going to try tonight. Hopefully, those of you listening, you will understand what I'm saying. To God, the most holy thing is not sanctity. It's freedom. It's freedom. There's nothing more sacred to God than freedom, because the most perfect reflection of the divine is not sanctity. It's perfect freedom. That's true sanctity. Freedom to act, and then the sanctity part is freedom to act perfectly. Okay, which is what we are striving to do. This is part of that becoming process we were talking about a few, questions ago. But that's really what it's all about. That doesn't mean Satan's always lost, right? He lost before he even got started. But the real issue is that the battle's in us. And the problem is, because Christians have been so, as we've talked about in previous shows with JJ, Zoroastrianism was a very dominant influence, and Gnosticism didn't help. It created this concept, this dualistic concept that there were forces that were beyond our control, that were weakening us and trying to steal us, and that's just not how evil works. The temptation is not some little devil whispering in your ear to go and do that bad thing or this bad thing. The temptation is the willingness to choose to be less than what you were created for. That's the temptation, because it's easier. So the temptation is to choose the path of least resistance, because in entropy, it's natural to do so. Even the universe does that here, right? Even the universe does that. Everything in nature takes the path of least resistance, because entropy demands that of itself. And so as you factor entropy into our spiritual condition, you find that that's where the nature of evil comes from. And that's what the real devil is. We need to stop thinking in superstitious terms. It helps to maybe externalize it in some way, to say, well, this is the framework in which I am operating and understanding. But what's more important, I think, is that you still never lose sight of the actuality of these things. So by all means, use the stories. You want to talk about demons and Satan and all this stuff, use that if that's your framework. But don't lose sight of the fact that these are realities that exist within you, and these are choices you're making. Satan is not a being of great power. Satan is a concept that you choose or reject. You want to be a lousy, shitty person? Go be a lousy, shitty person. And that is satanic. You want to be better than what you are? Well, you're never going to be perfect in this reality, but you can at least be a little better than you were the previous day. And I think as long as you're a little better each time, that is sanctity. That's the closest we can get. And you know what makes that possible? Freedom. So there's nothing more powerful than freedom. There's nothing more important than freedom. And this is why, all this missionary conversion bullshit that has happened over the centuries is unacceptable to me, because that deprives people of freedom. Missionary work is not about converting people. Missionary work is supposed to be about making freedom available to choose. Do you want to come along with me and experience this? Maybe develop a greater relationship with God? Or are you happy where you're at? The choice is where the sanctity is. You don't give them the choice, there's no merit in it. Force baptizing people? What the hell is that? So, we've seen this, and I think that's...
Well, it shows a lack of confidence in your faith in the first place.
I think it does, doesn't it?
If your faith necessitates that way of approaching life, then it's probably not worth much, really. And it's probably more self-loathing that's being inflicted on other people rather than embracing the gospel. I mean, we are supposed to win souls for Christ, but
by making that grace
you're supposed
available.
to do that. You make the case. You know, God is who is. You know, Jesus exists whether people believe in him or not. So you don't need to be so anxious about that. You know?
I think that's the problem, is that it becomes like, when you look at the methodologies that are deployed, that's where
it's a lack of faith. I think it's a lack of faith.
Well, I think it is. And I see that a lot in the Bible Belt, living out here in the South. It's a big problem here, but you're right. It does come down to ultimately what is a lack of faith. So that's our questions from the ether tonight. I thank you, Brandon, for those questions. I thank all of you who asked them. And so we're going to now take our first break here. And when we come back, the subject is astrology, and with a brand new guest, Aurorah Yarberry. You're not going to want to miss this. Don't go away.
So why is it so hard to let you go? To let you go. So why is it so hard to let you go? To let you go. So why is it so hard to let you go? Let you go. So why is it so hard to let you go? Let you So why is it so hard to let you go? Let you
Do you believe me? Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? sexy. So hot when you hit that shit, you hit that spin, you want that kid, you bring this back, you don't wanna get it. Don't worry about this. Don't die the things you wish when you in that place. You want that kiss and want that kiss. Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Taking a hold of me. Love wasn't meant to be. Love wasn't meant to be an enemy. And take all my energy. Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Do you believe me? Searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me?
Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark, as we now dive into tonight's subject on astrology with brand new guest, Aurorah Yarberry. I think it's going to be an interesting show for you. We've never covered this topic before, and I know so many of you have asked for it, so we're great. You know, we're going to have a good night, I think, and take your questions in the third hour. So try to hold off in the second. Let's just find out what we can find out about this interesting deep dive into our guest's special approach to this platform. I think it's going to be unique. And then in the third hour, you can ask all the questions you want. Okay? Don't go away. Okay, welcome everybody back to Vestiges After Dark. As tonight we really learned something new. I think you guys are really going to enjoy what we got for you here tonight. Our guest is artist, writer, and producer Aurorah Yarberry. She is a dedicated student of Western astrology since 2008, bringing her knowledge to life through her podcast, Blood, Moon, Milk, launched in 2018. Unlike many astrologers, Aurorah is known for her refusal to write conventional horoscopes. Instead, she offers a fresh perspective through her daily email newsletter, The Daily Dose. In it, she distills years of astrological wisdom into digestible insights, helping readers stay attuned to cosmic energies before they unfold, designed to be read in the morning over coffee. She champions the subtle benefits of using lunar cycles as a guide for mindfulness, meditation, and manifestation. By aligning with the moon's phases, her approach encourages individuals to set goals, remain flexible and resilient in the face of challenges, and urges her audience to seize opportunities with a heightened awareness of their consciousness when they arise. She adapts ancient astrological knowledge from the esoteric into a practical, down-to-earth advantage for everyday life. She believes this pause for reflection is meaningful globally, as a more mindful world is a more peaceful world with more opportunities for abundance for all. Sounds fantastic. Let us welcome Aurorah to the show. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy that you joining us, and want to be on because this is, again, a subject that we get asked about a lot. My students are no stranger to it. We cover it. We've been covering it for like the last, I want to say more than almost a year now. Yeah, it's been about a year, and it's a fascinating thing. Of course, we're doing more of the conventional natal chart stuff. I know you go a lot deeper and you take a different approach, but every time we have a new guest on this show, I'd like to always ask them, what got you interested in this topic and how did you become the person that you are today?
Well, I think for me, it goes back to childhood. One of my favorite toys was this star map projection. It was basically a very simple toy with a sort of light bulb with a map of the stars, and it came with a tape, and you could turn the tape on and it would tell you the mythology of the stories as this little globe spun around the bedroom at night. And it just allowed my imagination to kind of run wild. But I think that translated into using and being very familiar with mythology as sort of archetypes for self-reflection. That's something I just grew up with. And as I got older in college, I started I wasn't really aware of astrology other than what most people are aware of, the newspaper or magazine horoscope.
Yeah.
And when I found out there was more to it, it was like a magnet. I was just absolutely sucked in and just became voracious about learning as much as I could about it. And it was a hobby for about 10 years before I felt confident enough to start sharing what I had learned. And so that's when I started the podcast.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, because, we're going to get along just great because you said the magic word archetypes, and that's how I got into this,
I noticed that. He's one of our people.
I'm one of ours. Yes, one of us. We're always talking about archetypes on this show, and I think archetypes are essentially the foundation to our reality, and I think nowhere is that better seen, really, for those who study it, is astrology and cosmology and how that comes together, particularly with the mythical stories they're based on and how they sort of imprint into us in these unique ways. And I, like you, had a very similar experience. I didn't have a projection thing in my room, but I went to the planetarium often as a child, and it did inspire me to think. I've always been sort of a bit of a spacey kid, I mean, I liked sci-fi, and I if I could have been out there in the stars rather than on this planet, I probably would be. But it's just like where my imagination would take me, to the point that I wanted to know more about it. So I, of course, like most people, my introduction to astrology was the horoscope. And, and like most people originally probably thought that sun signs were all there were, and I think a lot of people still, think, oh, I'm a Cancer, I'm a Pisces, this is the way, this is everything. It's like, no, I mean, so much variation. So I guess let's talk about your particular approach now, because you seem to take it into a slightly different direction. You're not trying to necessarily draft these quick little stories in the newspaper where people could read them and be like, okay, well, all Cancers are going to experience this today, and all Leos are going to experience a betrayal this week. You know, you're taking it on a very different level from what I understand. So let's talk about your approach. Yeah,
I'd be happy to. So I think, first of all, because it's so common for people to have their first brush with astrology in a newspaper horoscope or a magazine horoscope, I think it's really important for people to understand that they're probably reading the wrong horoscope, frankly. Yeah. And so if you are one of those people who are reading the wrong horoscope, you're probably more skeptical than you would be if you had been accidentally reading the right horoscope. Because when astrologers write horoscopes for newspapers, they have to delineate a chart. And when they do that, they put the sun sign for, say, Cancer or Pisces in that first house. And then that gives us the house placements for everything else, all the other planets. And that's how they say, oh, well, Mercury is in your house of true love this month or something. And so if you don't know what your rising sign is, then you really should be reading your rising sign horoscope. That's what it boils down to. But if you're reading your sun sign's horoscope, unless you're one of the very rare people that your sun and your rising sign are exactly the same, then you're likely reading the wrong horoscope. So that, I think, also helps us to understand that it's a whole picture. The natal chart that you mentioned is really a snapshot of the sky the moment that a particular person came into their bodies and started this life on this planet. And it gives us a pretty good sort of blueprint operating system for how to navigate that particular person's life, what their challenges might be, where they might have places of ease or periods of time that are opportunistic. And if you know how to look at that and read that, boy, I mean, like, life becomes a little bit easier.
Well, it gives you foundation that you can work with. It's like you can see the parts that are not so clear to us as linear people. I think it kind of takes us a bit outside of time for a moment. My philosophy has always been that time's really mostly an illusion anyway. I mean, we can measure movements and astral bodies and all that stuff, and there is some validity to that in terms of how things work and how different energies come into being and fall out of being. And so we measure these things and we call that time. But ultimately, you know, so much of it is really just the process of energy exchange rather than something that is more concrete than just saying from this minute to this minute, this is going to happen. So what I mean by that is, your chart, you know, that moment that is you, that you become sort of like attracts like, the occult principle, and then combining that with synchronicity, we become a reflection of what the universe was in that moment, and the universe is sort of a reflection of us. It's, you know, so that's all outside of time. None of that exists within time. That is a perfect moment that is its own thing completely. And so how are we to really be able to navigate through the linear part of our perception when we are largely excluding the big picture? So astrology, I always think, and I think you said it a lot better than I just did. It gives us that framework to start with so that we know where the pitfalls might be and how to perhaps avoid them. Of course, nobody can do it perfectly. There's always going to be challenges, but yeah. So rising signs. I don't think a lot of people even know what their rising sign is, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that in my bio that you read earlier at the start of the segment, why I kind of tend to refuse writing traditional horoscopes, because I think it really does the study and the practice of astrology a disservice, because without explaining the foundational principles of it, it really does dumb down a practice which is over 1,000 years old. I mean, Western astrology goes back to the Babylonians and the Phoenicians, and then Berosus brought it over from Babylon to Greece in approximately 280 BC. So it predates And it has, I mean, it predates the modern era for sure, but we also have records of what happens when certain planets do certain things in the sky. And yes, I realize that some of that is quite dated material, but when those same things happen over and over and over again, and we're able to see causation with causality, that gives us a pretty good, reliable, predictive indicator of what might happen. So it's not necessarily saying it's hard and fast. And the universe does like to surprise us. Once you think you kind of have a hang of things, I think that's when we're setting ourselves up to be surprised one way or another. But having the framework within which to work, I think, can give us a lot of tools that each person can take as far and as deep as they would like, or work with somebody like myself who can guide them to kind of set their own personal goals within that framework and use the tools of astrology to take some time out and just get centered. It can just be as quiet, like as simple as getting quiet and sitting in a peaceful place and just trying to quiet your mind and the mental chatter and sort of figure out what it is that's most important to you when it's not some sort of crisis scenario. Because when you do this on a regular basis, you build that mental muscle of inner peace and gnosis, self-wisdom. And so that's what I try to help people find, is a way to use the tool and navigate the tools that have been in existence in a way that's practical and down to earth. And I mean, wouldn't you rather go get a haircut on a day that you're likely to get a better haircut?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's true, because I think what happens, and this is an interesting segue for some people, I think, because we have a kind of a diversified audience listening from all different platforms out there. So we simulcast this show. We're on YouTube, but we're predominantly a podcast that is originates on Spreaker and then gets distributed out to all the various podcast suppliers, like, iHeartRadio, iTunes, all that stuff. And then, we're on Facebook, Twitch, and Instagram. So I've got a lot of people that follow me. There are people that are, Catholics, there's Christians, there's witches, there's Christian witches, there's atheists, agnostics. I have the gamut that listen to this show. And I think for Christians, one of the challenges that they have, and kind of surprised when I talk so favorably about astrology, is that they think that they've been taught by their pastors that this is some kind of evil thing. And I try to explain to them, no, that's not exactly at all what the theology is teaching. What the theology says is determinism. That's the problem. When you actually study astrology, you realize that it's not deterministic. It's giving you the landscape, which is fixed. Yes, that's fixed, but you can choose how to navigate that landscape any way you want to once you know what the landscape is. So it's kind of like charting a course on a boat with a map. And as long as you know where the storms are, you can navigate around them. Can you choose to go through the storm? Sure, go ahead. If you want to take the greater risk, go for it. Maybe it's a shorter distance and you think it's worth it. I don't know. But the fact is, astrology isn't telling you that this is what must happen. It's showing you all of the potentialities you have to work with and how to make the best decision within them. That's not determinism at all. So when Christians start criticizing astrologers and saying that, this is occultism, this is evil, I have to remind them, no, it's determinism that's evil. It's not deterministic. This is not deterministic at all. It's showing you opportunity, and you make the choice. So it's perfect freedom, because it's not telling you what you have to do or what you will do. It's showing you what you can do. And it sounds like you really take that approach to the furthest extreme that you can.
Yeah, well, I like to, when I have sessions with clients, it's sort of Socratic in method. I'll tell people what planetary transits are going to be affecting them and when. And then I'll ask them, like, what are the themes that are going on in your life surrounding your relationships or your power dynamics or whatever that particular transit has at play. And then we have a conversation and they get to pick it apart for themselves. And then I get to kind of help them look at a timeline where, like, further down the road where the planets have moved on a little bit, to say, well, by this point in time, this issue should resolve one way or another, and I'll give them sort of a scenario and a landscape in which they're working, because it really is a picture of all the planets and where they're traveling, because they never stop. Right. I mean, astrology really is more than just your sun sign. It's the moon, it's the other heavenly bodies, it's even asteroids. And there's even something that I work with that's an invisible point called the lunar node, which is where the eclipses fall. But knowing where that happens, and when and where the eclipses are happening can point out very dramatic points in time for people personally. Yeah. So knowing that stuff, it's not at all saying like, well, your marriage is going to fall apart if you don't do X, Y, or Z. It's saying, well, if you're having complicated issues about asserting yourself in relationships, this is going to be a heightened theme around this period of time. And so, then my clients get to take that information and internalize it and reflect on it and implement the changes that feel right to them and their hearts. And that's how I work with people.
I mean, I think that's brilliant because, think about traditional therapy, okay? It works on that same model, but it doesn't have any of that foresight. It doesn't have any of that information to work with. It has to go strictly on the limited perspective that the client might have into their own psyche, which if you're dealing with severe mental illness, there's probably not much mindfulness there. So you think that this helps?
I think astrology is very therapeutic when practiced with integrity. I do think it's a great accompaniment for therapy, traditional therapy too. I'm not a trained psychoanalyst, but I'm happy to refer people to those who need that tool and want that tool. I think it's great. But I think the two together can be really powerful and transformative, because one gives you the behavioral psychological aspects of how we process things like trauma. The other, astrology being the other one, which is obviously what I practice, helps us to step back outside of ourselves and can give us a little bit of distance from that interpersonal dynamic with your parents or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your neighbor or whatever the relationship is, and can give you a broader perspective on what is at play. And if you can start to take yourself out of these scenarios, it becomes a little less personal. And when that happens, we can kind of become a little bit more empathetic to other people.
Sure. And
it's just one little baby step away from being reactionary.
Sure.
And when you can be less reactionary, that room begins to grow for this person is wrong and I am right. And there's no room in the middle. But when you can see like, well, this Saturn transit's happening and in the house of my abode, your fourth house in the astrology chart, maybe there's something structural going on and, a tree falls at your house during a storm and it messes up your neighbor's fence and you get into it. Well, that's structural, but your neighbor might be having something going on in their chart too, which you're not even aware of. So you get this this opportunity to step back and step outside yourself and look at a bigger picture. And you also get to look at a date on a timeline and know, well, this particular issue will be resolved on this date, and I can circle it on the calendar. Sure. And that can be hugely helpful for people who are going through really tough times. Because when you're in it, you need that little light at the end of the tunnel to be able to look forward to. And in my experience, I have never had a client that's come back to me and said, you're wrong about a date. They're usually like, oh, this thing happened. Oh my God, let me tell you what happened.
Yeah. What I find fascinating about it is the the fact that it can provide the kind of insight that gives people, and you kind of alluded to it, the light at the end of the tunnel effect. I think so much can happen in a person's life when they're going through trauma that it becomes almost impossible to ever see that there's an end there. And this can give them something more concrete to focus on and say, well, this is the time that you're in, but it's not always going to be that way, right? Because these cycles are always in flux, they're always changing. They're not fixed. That's kind of what I mean by it's not really deterministic. And even though, we know exactly where these planets are going to be mathematically all the way into the distant future, that doesn't mean that our approach to these experiences has to be that way. For example, I have a Grand Cross in my chart, and when I went to an astrologer for the first time, that was of course something that she emphasized and talked about all these challenges and difficulties that I would be having, and I certainly went through all of them. But I also learned how to exploit it to my benefit. And so now it's made me a much more multifaceted person than just the typical sun sign Cancer, that I ordinarily would be, or probably, could have been if I didn't know that these are the things that I had to work with. And then I'm a person that says, well, let's see how I can maximize that potential and do something with it. So even something that's challenging or a difficult configuration in a chart is an opportunity. Would you say that that's true?
Oh, absolutely. In all of the charts that I have read, and especially charts of famous people and celebrities, I tend to look at trends within planets and when they're having more periods of ease or more periods of challenges. You can kind of tell by how their career is going and, maybe even news stories with that particular person. But I think that most people who gain some sort of extreme fame or success usually gain it after a period of intense challenges, like a Saturn transit or a Pluto transit. And it's asking us on some level to get rid of that which isn't necessary and make room and energy for new things to come in. And you can also focus on what's really important, and that drilling down on what's important for that particular individual can then be rewarded and catapult you to that next level, whatever that level is for that person. But putting in the work and recognizing you're in that kind of phase, and not just blowing off the responsibility that the universe is kind of giving you the opportunity to take on, is very, very rewarding, more often than not.
How do you work, or what's your particular philosophy or approach to the importance placed on the natal chart's effect versus the present transits that we're currently dealing with? Is it a perfect 50-50 kind of exchange of energy, or would you say one's more important than the other?
I think that the natal chart I think they're both important. So the natal chart is a lot more to do with understanding oneself, where transits kind of help us to digest and understand what is going on in the world at large and the landscape that we're playing in that particular moment, that day. So the newsletter that I write, the Daily Dose, is transit based. It's talking about these are the major transits of the day. This is the kind of stuff you might see in the news, or this is a good day to maybe not focus on stuff that needs a lot of attention to detail because there's a harsh Neptune Mercury transit. So really, it's a day better spent and more well designed to work with creative subject matter and to relax a little bit versus having to go and do your taxes or something, for example. Like, there's days that are good for some things and there's other days that are good for other things. And just sort of knowing which one is which is how transits are helpful. But the natal chart shows us how those transits interact with us. So the way my transits, or the way my natal chart would interact with transits, would be very different from the way your natal chart interacts with transits, because your planetary placements are just different. They're in different placements.
And the transits also affect the target of whatever you're looking at. So if you're talking about, let's say, the United States of America, then you would use its chart, and then those transits would affect the country differently too.
Yes, exactly. So in America right now, we're going through a period called the Pluto return, which is, so a lot of people have heard of Saturn returns if they're at all familiar with astrology. And that's a period of time that everybody goes through between the ages of 28 to 30 years old. People tend to get go through a tough period of about 2 years when Saturn returns to the point where Saturn was in the sky when you were born. Saturn has about a 30-year orbit, and it takes him about 30 years to go make his way around. And when he comes back to where he was when you were born, you tend to be tasked with leveling up. But in order to level up, he really puts you through the ringer most of the time. Pluto does this too.
It's really so true. I've experienced exactly what you're talking about, so I know.
Yeah. No, I did too. Yeah. Most people do, and they don't know what is going on. They're just like pulling their hair out, and they're frustrated. But if you know it's a Saturn return, it lasts for about 2 years, and you'll get through it. Everybody does, for the most part. That can kind of take the stress away from the ambiguity of it a little bit. You're like, oh, this is just a phase. Things will change, and then there will be another phase. And they're not all negative necessarily. And Saturn returns can be incredibly rewarding. But Pluto also does this too, but he takes much, much longer to make his way around the zodiac. His orbit's about 240 years, whereas Saturn is only 30. So most people will experience maybe 1 or 2 or 3 Saturn returns if you live to be 90 or so. But Pluto, you'll never have a Pluto return in your chart because you just won't live that long. Okay. But our country is going through a Pluto return right now. And I believe it is near exact right around the time of the election.
Oh, isn't that crazy?
It is.
But not all together unexpected when you consider, what we've been building up towards. So it doesn't surprise me that we're almost at exactly that point.
Yes. Yeah. And so, Pluto as a planet represents death and rebirth and transformation. I like to think of it as Phoenix energy. It's like energy that can rise from the ashes, and then it is reborn, and then it burns itself to death, and then comes back stronger and better and more creative. And so when we have a Pluto transit, it can feel like the world is absolutely dissolving in some very real way. Now, you might not experience a Pluto return, but Pluto is likely hitting other planets in your chart throughout your life. So there are good reasons to understand what his energy feels like when you're experiencing his presence. And I say all the planets I just talk about as if they're people because they have personalities.
Oh, they do. They certainly do. Yeah. Archetypes are I tell people they're living things. They're sentient. They really are.
Yeah. And so we're all witness to and living through America's Pluto return currently. And we have been for the last couple of years, but we're getting ready for its final pass through because I believe Pluto's moving into Aquarius, which is where it was when the American Revolution happened. And Aquarius is very much the sign of revolution and rebellion, but it's also the sign of creative genius and doing something that is about freedom and taking the path less traveled. And it's very much the sign of the humanitarian, which is sort of the spirit in which this country was founded. But now we have the opportunity to redefine ourselves on some level as a country.
I was going to say England's presumably, hello, by the way. I was going to say that England's presumably been through at least 5 or 6 of these. So,
yes. Yeah.
It's tempting for Americans to think that only America exists, right?
I actually lived in England for a long time. So I've lived in Bournemouth and London. And I think the chart that most people use for Britain now is, I think it might be the Magna Carta, like the date that the Magna Carta was signed. If I am not
1215.
Yeah.
1215.
Yeah.
Well,
so
that was
it would have
revolutionary
been
for sure. Yeah. And a good way, and a very good way. So do you think it could be that for us? Do you think that this, upon the completion of this Pluto return, do you think the United States has now got a brighter future ahead? Are we moving past all the darkness that I really feel that we've fallen into as a society?
Yeah, I would like, I'm an optimist. I'm a Sagittarius, a solar Sagittarius,
Okay.
which imbues me with an optimistic, sort of spirit.
That's my rising. I'm a rising Sagittarius, so I can kind of relate.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sagittarius is also the sign of religion.
Yeah. That's true.
So it's not surprising. But I think that we have some growing up to do as a country. And also, astrologically speaking, we're on the verge of 3 outer planets. 3 slow-moving outer planets are all going to be changing sign in the next 2 years. We've got Pluto moving into Aquarius very soon, and he'll spend the next 20 years there. We have Neptune at the last few degrees of Pisces. He'll be moving into Aries next year. And then we also have Uranus in the last few degrees of Taurus. Taurus is the financial axis, Taurus and Scorpio. So I think that we have this opportunity to rethink how money is being used and how the financial markets work to support our economies. Neptune is the sign of spirituality, and it's been in its home sign of Pisces for some time. But in Aries, it tends to have spiritual wars. The last time Neptune was in Aries was when the Civil War kicked off. Mm-hmm. So, and then Pluto moving into Aquarius, the sign of rebellion and freedom. I think that we're going to be, on some level, kicking off the establishment and sort of forging a new path. I don't know what that path is yet, but I do think it's on its way to being figured out.
So you think that's inevitable, regardless of who wins the election, or
yes,
or would it be inhibited by one or the other?
I try to not talk about politics too much.
Sure, I get that. Yeah, you're not going to offend us here, though. So we're kind of open ended in that respect.
Well, mainly, it's because I don't think I think politics are really divisive and sort of a tinderbox, and it can take people out of the energy of being reflective and wanting to work together. And so, I mean, like, that's the reason why, not because I'm one party or the other or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think if we put our energy towards building a more peaceful place where everybody has the opportunities to pursue their dreams and pursue the things that make their heart really light on fire in a good way, that we have enough to for everyone to flourish. Like, there really is enough here for everyone to be healthy, clothed, and have a place to live, and food in the fridge, but it's about figuring out what we do with our most precious resource, which is time. That really, I think, interests me. And because we're only here for a very short period of time. And there's all the money in the world. You can go out and make some tomorrow, but you cannot make more time.
That's true. No.
Yep.
That is so true. And I agree with everything that you just said there, wholeheartedly. I wish people would focus more on opportunity, because even just like a chart, right? Even just a difficult chart, because obviously when you talk about something like politics, just as an example, you've got one side that believes one thing and they're against the other side, and vice versa. So obviously the side that loses is going to be the one that feels the bad transit, the uncomfortable, difficult transit, but that's still an opportunity. That's not an excuse to be like, oh, I'm a victim now. No, it's an opportunity to grow for either side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think oftentimes more opportunity can come from failure and from difficulty than from success. We learn the most from failure. But I think that we've all lived through some very trying and challenging times in the last few years.
Very much so. Yeah.
And so I think, someone will win the election. I don't know who that's going to be. I haven't looked at the charts of either candidate.
You do that intentionally because you don't want to know, or
yeah, because when I look at charts, I'm very intuitive and things will just unfold for me. And I don't always want to know things. I mean,
I wouldn't either.
For clients, people ask me and they pay me, and I can give them what I see and I perceive, and I'm happy to do that. But I think with politics, it's really up to all of us as a collective to make this decision. We're all citizens of this country in America, and we all have the ability to go and cast our vote. And it's a collective choice that we get to make. Each one.
I was going to say, because as well as being a priest, I work for a politician. When people say, talking about politics, they're actually not talking about politics. They're talking about one side or another. They're talking about my candidate, your candidate. That's not politics. That's partisanship. And that's not the same thing. I wish people would talk about actual politics as opposed to, preferred candidate or, whatever, because even if you want to look at it as a kind of binary, like people want to do, not just in America, but in Australia and in England too. And I'll stop after this because I want to hear more about astrology. But my point would be to say, okay, so you choose your branch. Okay, you choose your side. Now, what about the politics within your party or within your person, or that's the real politics. Whether it's a red or a blue banner behind it, it actually isn't politics. That's just about partisanship.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of that, I mean, you can boil that down into power dynamics and interpersonal. I mean, to take it into an astrological direction, how people's charts are wired to be power hungry. Yeah. Because people with certain placements will be more driven to seek power and positions of power over other people. And they, on some levels, they kind of can't help it if they don't know this about themselves. But if they have had a reading and they understand what their chart is wired to want, and how that shows up in their personality, and they have the wherewithal to be self-reflective of it, then that leads them to a place where they can make more conscious decisions. They're not so a victim of their own whims. It's really about being able to say, like, well, I have a Mars conjunct Saturn in Capricorn, and I really want to make money and make big things happen and exert my influence over other people. That kind of mentality and ability can be used for good things, beneficial things for the collective whole of humanity, or it can be used to be absolutely tyrannical.
Well, let's talk about that then, because I think that might be a helpful way to kind of maybe get perspective on what we can look forward to or not look forward to, depending upon your perspective. But I mean, what really breaks down, I think, regardless of whether or not you get conservative or liberal politicians in there, is whether or not the people that are in control can communicate with each other, because that's really what determines whether or not we have a good experience or a bad experience, in my opinion. So it won't matter to me whether or not Trump's in office or Harris. What matters to me is whether or not they can communicate with all of the other intelligences that make up the U.S. government and the U.S., as an entire citizenry. So what are the planets of, like, Mercury? I guess Jupiter would be also part of this too, because of the rulership aspect. As far as the archetypes, what do you see in terms of what is coming astrologically? Does it favor better communication going forward, or is it going to be more of what we've seen where both parties don't want to talk?
I think that people, well, so Pluto in Aquarius is going to set us up for a 20-year period of taking the path less traveled as a collective. It is the sign of the humanitarian. It's also, it highly favors technology. So I think technology and using tech to communicate could be something that plays a huge role going forward. If we look at Neptune, though, which is idealism and spirituality, when it moves into Aries, I think that's the time period we are going to have to be aware of. And I believe that happens April 20th next year.
Okay.
So next spring, we could see people who, and I feel like we're kind of getting hints of this now with events in the Middle East, with Palestine. And it might not be happening just in America. It could be this global situation where people really feel called to pick sides, because Neptune in Aries it's spiritual warfare. It's war on and aggression and activity and being motivated to make quick, sort of aggressive moves based on spiritual beliefs. And that doesn't, and spiritual beliefs could be, veiled as politics also, or vitriol, like, well, this person is right. These actions that this group of people have made are so barbaric. And, both sides could say whatever they like to support their case. And it could be very difficult to know what's true because of the advent and the prevalence of AI. And so I think that people are really going to have to get centered on what they know to be true versus, like, for fact and versus fiction. I think that's going to be very key. So I think misinformation could be a very big theme going forward. I think I saw a bit of this happening. So I live in Western North Carolina, and on TikTok, there was all of these conspiracy theories about why what was happening in Asheville was happening. And it was sort of really out there. And I'm a skeptical and open-minded person. And I think it's good to be kind of both of those things, because crazy things do happen. But when there are campaigns that are concerted efforts to change the mind of populace, one way or another, that's what we have to be aware of going on, and being able to question the motives behind it. What do the people in power who are behaving this way, whether, like, any message, any person in power, what do they have to gain from us if we listen and behave the way they want us to?
Yeah. Because
there wouldn't be something for them to benefit from if we didn't do what they want. They wouldn't be asking us to behave this way.
Yeah.
So I think it's healthy, and we're going to have to learn how to question the things that we hear to a healthy extent. That doesn't mean like the government's lying to us at every step along the way, but I think just being able to generate news sources that have integrity, that resonate with people, that feel holistically truthful and honest and unbiased, will be key to figuring out the way forward. And I think that's going to be a decentralized source of information.
Oh, it has to
it
be.
Might not, yeah. I think that's where communication is going to come into play. It's not going to be the mainstream media sources. It's going to be people and groups, small groups who have followings and who have earned a place of leadership amongst their followers because of their integrity that they've exhibited, that become these sources, these trusted sources.
I mean, I'm the first person to say that, church is bad enough as a nonprofit. Can you imagine what it would be if it was a for-profit organization? There are some that try to operate that way. So we've seen what that's like. But I would argue that just like religion, media and healthcare have business being for profit. I think that's
I agree.
And so if we have as long as we have for-profit media, we're going to have lies. We're never going to be able to trust them. So yes, I think decentralized is going to be the way to go.
I would throw in education with that too, because because if there is a reason to keep a population subordinate and cheap to employ, that only benefits a certain class. So
I do agree with that.
Well, then if we, just to push back a little bit, if we're saying that governments often misrepresent things in order to manipulate people to vote for them, why are they more trustworthy to run schools than a private individual where it can
I wouldn't
be
want the government
dispersed?
running it either. I think what we're talking about, honestly, is having a completely impartial, unbiased nonprofit that would actually have bylaws that prevent
like charter
it.
schools, for example.
Well, charter school would be a very good way to go.
A great thing in America, and of course they're resisted entirely by the Democrat Party in America because teachers.
Well,
unions.
I mean, but there's also some where they get. I mean, the other side of that coin though is that they're not always free. I mean, there's sometimes. It can be very costly to enter into some of these programs. So what I would envision, and I don't want to speak for our guest tonight, but what I'm hearing her say, and I agree again 100% with it, is that there's certain institutions that we've become dependent upon in our modern day society that we cannot now live without. Thank you, Leslie, for that like. And the way that we deal with that is I think the only way to deal with that going forward is to take the self-benefit out of the equation, which means it can't be for profit. You can't have, but I'm not saying government run, because government is the biggest for-profit organization we've got.
Agreed.
So government's not really the way to go. We want to have completely unbiased, impartial types of institutions that deal with things like media, education, healthcare. I think that's the only way to do it. But that's
or
my
honestly
approach.
Partial. I think either impartial or honest about their partiality.
Well,
a Christian school is not hiding their intention, right? If they say, the purpose of, we're a Catholic school, we're going to have a Catholic mass.
But the problem with the Catholic schools, they're going to charge you through the nose to go there. So that's not really for profit. I mean, that's not really nonprofit too, So it kind of
depends how you look at it.
Yeah, it depends how you look at it. Because they see it as a charity.
And they're not all the same, as you know.
No, they're not. Yeah. They're not. So my feeling on it is, thinking back to what Aurorah, you were saying, is that because of AI and the risk of AI and the risk of exploitation, that somebody that can stand to profit, like a big multimedia organization or Facebook or Amazon or any of these big corporations that honestly are really the government, because I don't think the United States is really a democracy anymore. It's been a corporatocracy for a very long time, a plutocratic corporatocracy, what I call it. So it's really being run by these giant mega corporations, these multi-trillion-dollar for-profit things, and exploitation is how they make their money. I can't turn on Facebook, Aurorah, and see, now it's like everything's the 2 or 3 second TikTok like video. There's no substance to it. It's always bullshit. Every single thing I see on there's bullshit. It's always
killing your attention span.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, it's not. It's outside of the attention span. It's like they're showing you stuff that's not real, but telling you that it is. Like I saw this, even benign things. Like I saw this guy showing the future of cutting down trees, and he's shooting this laser at the branches and they're just falling to the ground, and it's like there's no freaking way that's real. This is just AI generated bullshit, and you go to the comments and people are just eating it up, hook, line, and sinker. They just can't get enough of it. So really what you said, Aurorah, is like spot on, because that is ultimately what needs to happen in order for us to move into a much better, I think, society, is where we're not going to fall into the mentality of there being, just the risk of exploitation. We need to know how to discern, and that's the most important thing. We're going to take our next break here, our final break, actually. When we come back, we'll be taking your questions all across the various platforms. You can even call into the show. I'll give you that number when we come back. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been talking tonight with the brilliant Aurorah Yarberry about astrology and her work, and really so many fascinating perspectives on it. Very intelligent conversation tonight, I think, and I'm very much looking forward to having more. If you've got a question, we'd love to hear whatever's on your mind. You can ask it in the various chats around the internet. It is, we are on Facebook. You can ask us there. You can also ask us on YouTube. That's where most of the questions come in. You can also call into the show if you'd like. The number to call is... Oh, wait, I've lost it. Can you put it up on the screen for me, moderators? Because for some reason, it's not coming up on my phone. Anyway, I will have that up there in a second. I don't know what's going on. My phone's just not wanting to cooperate tonight. The technology doesn't always want to do that. Okay, there it is. 802-321-0073. Thank you so much, Moosh. 802-321-0073. That's the number to call if you'd like to call into the show. If you'd like to call in internationally, you can do so free of charge by just dialing Skype. Go to Eye of the Seer on Skype, and you will connect in, and we'll be able to chat about what's on your mind. Try to keep your conversation to tonight's topic on astrology, okay? We will have open lines, open topics coming up in a few weeks, so you'll have your chance for other off-topic subject matter when that show comes on. All right, more to come. Don't go away. I could be lost without my moderator sometimes. Thank you guys for keeping me on track. So that number is now on screen. I think I've been forgetting to put it up over the last few shows. So it's now on screen for those of you who...
They're all over it.
Yeah, good. Awesome. Thank you so much. And of course, most of the audience likes to just ask in the chat room. So I'm sure we have some. Jamie, have you seen any there that you'd like to present to our guests tonight?
There was one up thread about having to how to navigate or avoid a bad
transit.
Yeah.
Well,
I think navigate through it. Sorry.
Yeah, it would be dependent on that particular person's set of circumstances in their chart. It's hard to sort of give a global answer for depending on which planets are involved. You know how long the transit will last for and the intensity of it. For example, I had one client who came to me a couple of years ago, and she wanted to do a reading. And so we had our session, and I told her, don't make plans this particular weekend. Something unexpected is going to come up, and it's going to have to do with sex, or reproduction or children. And she kind of got really excited, and she said, oh, maybe I'll get pregnant again. They were trying for a second child. And when that weekend came and went, what happened was she was rushed to the hospital with a cyst on her ovary, and she had emergency surgery and had an ovary removed.
Oh boy!
Oh my!
And so, unexpected, absolutely having to do with sex and reproduction. I couldn't tell her how painful it would be, but I just told her, you do not want to make plans. That you don't want to travel, you don't want to be doing something that is going to be disrupted by this. So, I mean, like whatever this is, it's going to stop you in your tracks. And I think she was actually really grateful for kind of getting the heads up so that her plate was more or less cleared around that time period for her to be attentive and to be aware of what was going on. And then when it happened, she was like, oh, this is it. This is the thing that was going to happen this weekend. So, I mean, it really is, that's just an example of when you're able to look at somebody's chart, you can sort of see these things emerging, and it's only with experience and also a little bit of intuition and a lot of reading and learning that you get to the point where you can help people on that level. And so, I mean, I've been doing it since 2008, so getting towards 20 years now of looking at charts.
Thank God for computers, because when I first got into astrology, the only option was to do it by hand. And I was never really that, I did not enjoy math, so it was not very attractive to me. But when the Kepler program came out, it was expensive, but my God, it was revolutionary, the things you can do with that program. So that's what I still use to this day, and it makes it a lot easier.
Oh, yeah. I'm a fan of astrology tool. Like I have a couple of different programs I use, and bookcases full of books, and I've worked with different astrologers over the years, and it's really just through the reiterative practice, because the planets move every day. The moon changes signs every 2.5 days. They do not take days off.
Right.
So that's a good thing and a bad thing, because you don't have a slow season, but you just have to kind of schedule your sessions and your work around what you have going on in your life, kind of regardless of transits sometimes. I mean, sometimes you just have to travel when it's Mercury retrograde, but if you know it's Mercury retrograde, you might just end up bringing a book. Yeah. Instead of
prepare for it.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of being caught off guard and getting frustrated, you're like, oh, well, this is a perfect opportunity to catch up on my reading. So
I like my chart in a lot of ways. Other than the Grand Cross that really wreaked havoc on my life until I learned how to deal with it. I have, a Cancer sun. I have a Sagittarius rising and a Capricorn moon. So I feel very balanced, in the sense that I'm not the typical Cancer, in the sense that I don't get overly emotional or I don't get compromised. I'm actually,
No, that'd be me.
Yeah. You're now Jamie's the complete opposite. You've got Cancer and what everything's Cancer for you, isn't it? What do you have?
My sun's Cancer, my Mercury's Cancer, my Mars is Cancer, my rising is Cancer.
I don't think I could deal with that. I have enough trouble dealing with the sun side of myself, but with the Sagittarius, which really keeps me going, and it gives me a little bit of extroversion, gets me out of that shell. And then with the stability that Taurus gives me and my emotional nature with the moon, I'm it's not a bad place to be, honestly. And I think that's helped.
Taurus moons, the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. And so that's one of the moon is at home in the sign of Cancer, but it does the best in the sign of Taurus because it's stable, and it can find beauty and comfort in the sign of Taurus, where, in water signs, the moon is a lot more emotional. It's a lot more volatile. It's a lot more changeable. And each planetary position and sign and placement has its positives and its negatives, but it really is the whole picture and how all the planets work together.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for me, my moon is in Libra, which most of the time makes me fairly diplomatic, but there's a dark side to Libra energy too. You can be a people pleaser and you can put everybody else's needs and wants before yourself, and kind of run yourself ragged trying to make other people happy at the expense of your own truth and happiness. So it's about that awareness of the way you are wired that can help clue you in to your behavior and to help kind of help you find your balance, what works for you and works in your life. That's different for every single person.
Yeah. What's the best balance for a Scorpio? Because I find that Scorpios, in my experience, Scorpios are the most difficult ones to deal with. Now, I can kind of deal with them fairly well. I've had Scorpios in my family that I was close to, so I think that gave me a little bit of an edge growing up. But overall, Scorpios are challenging people a lot of times. 9 out of 10 times I challenging person, it's like, I bet they're a Scorpio. Then I find out that they are. So what's the best counter for them?
Taurus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my moon is helping then, you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. As somebody I have a stellium in Scorpio, and so my Mercury, my Venus, and my Pluto are all in Scorpio, along with my midheaven. Wow, I don't have any earth in my chart whatsoever.
Interesting. Okay.
All fire, air, and water. So for me, I find that doing the thing that isn't in my chart helps to balance out those rough edges, shall we say. So for me, like, I actually really love gardening as a form of self-therapy, actually getting my hands in dirt, because I don't have any earth in my chart.
Yeah.
I don't know how that might play out for other people. Like if somebody didn't have any fire in their chart, maybe they could take a fire breathing class, one of those like sideshow kind of thing, or like learn how to work with the element on some level to kind of find some balance there. But I think it's kind of about filling in the gaps to some extent. Scorpios are difficult. It's difficult energy. My mother was a Scorpio. I have not the best relationship with her.
Yeah.
I can agree. But Pisces energy is also difficult. Yeah. Cancer energy is also difficult.
The water signs, we're tough. I mean, we are, we are tough.
But it's like with that difficulty comes intensity and passion, but also the ability to take care and nurture other people and intuition. It comes with its blessings and its gifts, but sometimes, the lessons that come with that energy are insurmountable for some people. Sure. I mean, it's like really just difficult. One of the hardest things for a Scorpio person to do is to let go. Just to let go of something, because they just have a tendency to grab on and to like kind of beat a dead horse. Yeah. Like regardless of whether it's a relationship or a job or some sort of traumatic event that they are mulling over, letting go of something that is almost painfully seductive on some level, I think is an issue with a lot of Scorpios, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there's brilliance there too. Once like a Scorpio is kind of on your side and on your team, that person will go to bat for you and really be there when nobody else is. And so they can be incredibly strong, devoted allies. But because of that strength on the outside, they're incredibly vulnerable on the inside.
Water signs are they are loyal. They are loyal to the people to those almost they care about. To a fault, yes, they can get themselves hurt that way. That's true. Yeah.
So I think, every single sign has its positives, its negatives. Yeah. Any astrology book for beginners will tell you kind of the bullet points of what those are.
Dynamic and static.
Yeah, exactly. Or just the proclivities, Scorpio, for example, they like to get to the heart of the matter. They don't like a lot of small talk. Right. That's boring.
So true.
They want to talk about like your most traumatic, deep, dark secrets and things that have happened to you, because they really have a need to connect with other people on a deep level, because that's where they live emotionally. They live on somewhere deeper than most of us do. And that can be really uncomfortable for people who really prefer to keep things sort of light and happy. So it is sort of, in a way, a matter of perspective.
Definitely is. Yes. Brandon, I don't know if you've seen any questions in the chats or if you would like to ask one yourself. You are the master of questions.
So, yes, we did have a question at the beginning, but it's kind of more so related to like an open lines episode.
Okay. So we'll hold that one for the next, maybe you can do it for the ether next week.
Okay.
Yep.
But, okay. So my question would be, what would you tell a person when one sign is more dominant? For example, I have 5 planets in Aquarius. My sun, moon, or actually, yeah, let me read it.
I mean, you're the poster. You're the poster child of Aquarius. Let me just tell you that. I can tell you that right now. You look up Aquarius in the dictionary. It's his picture there. It really is. Yeah.
Aquarians are about when Pluto moves into Aquarius for the next 20 years. Aquarians are really about to have a heyday. Like really,
my Pluto. Yeah, my Pluto is in Aquarius.
Your Pluto is in Aquarius?
Yep. Pluto, Neptune, my sun, moon, and Jupiter.
How can that be?
Yeah, I think that might be incorrect. Are you sure it's Pluto?
It looks like Pluto.
What's the symbol? Because Pluto has 2 different symbols, and sometimes people can confuse them.
It's very blurry, but it's the blue one.
Oh, that's Neptune.
That's Neptune.
Oh, Neptune.
Yeah.
I think I'm confused.
You can remember Neptune because he looks like a trident, like King Trident from the Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, Bishop.
No, you're fine. you thought I thought for a minute maybe you're a vampire. You've been with us for a really long time.
Yeah,
I don't know. He's an immortal.
But Neptune at 0 degrees Aquarius. I mean, when very shortly Pluto will be conjunct. Actual Pluto moving now will be conjunct your Neptune. In Aquarius at 0 degrees, which could lead to some sort of profound spiritual revolution of your own in some way.
He's on his way.
Yeah, some sort of profound spiritual event or awakening or experience that could be sort of otherworldly or, some out-of-body experience. That phrase comes to mind. Something that gives you a broader perspective and is really out of the box. And Pluto transits really should be as close to exactitude as possible. What was the degree at which your Neptune is at?
0.
0. Are there any minutes there? It's just like totally 0.
It's right on the cusp. It's like
it looks to be totally 0. 0 degrees, and the time is 0.
Okay. Well,
wow.
Yes.
If I'm reading it correctly.
Yeah.
Can you put it up to the screen again one more time?
Yeah. So the 0 and
it is.
Oh,
it's
it is. Wow, that's crazy.
Remarkable.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
It's rare. I see planets at 0 degrees. So that's called the anaretic degree.
Yeah, 00.
When a planet is at the very first degree or the very last degree of a sign, its traits tend to be amplified, sort of like those qualities are a neon, if you will, in somebody's chart. So spirituality Neptune is all about spirituality and a divine connection to the universe. But in Aquarius, that's taking things sort of in a humanitarian direction, and using technology, and working with large groups of people, but not so much one-on-one, not being really in close proximity to those people. So yeah, I'm not surprised you're a moderator on a podcast about spirituality. But when I can look up when Pluto is going to hit your Neptune and give you a date if you'd like, when that could be happening for you, because it's soon.
Yeah, let's see that.
Why not?
Just one moment. Talk amongst yourselves. We'll give you a date.
Well, Father Chris, I know Father Chris has an interesting chart too that we never actually got to. We talking about
I'm happy to share it.
And, I don't remember exactly what it was that was so remarkable about it, but it was very different than what I would have expected your chart to be. So that I interpreted as, and it's curious to see what Aurorah might say, but that's what
I've got a lot of stuff in one quadrant up there.
It's all in one quadrant. Pretty much.
So you're another one of these that has it all kind of clustered together. But it just it was interesting because what I know of you was, I even questioned, didn't I? I questioned, did you have your times correct? You sure you got the right dates? The right location set, because it was like, this is not the person this is not what I would have thought from. So you really did take some challenging configurations there and make something good of it. So let's see what she says. But anyway, let's find out what she found out.
If you
from
let me
Brandon.
share the screen, I'll happily put it up.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, Pluto has already hit your Neptune twice. Once it has. The first time was January 20th, 2024. And then the second time was September 1st of this year, 2024. And then the next time it will be November 19th. So is there something that comes to mind around those times that has been profoundly inspired or spiritual for you on some level?
Nothing that comes to my mind. The only thing, my brother's birthday is on November 19th. But other than that, no.
Was it one of was it one of the many times you were forced to get baptized? could it be? Just wondering about that one. We joke a lot.
All over the screen.
That was only twice. It was only twice, Bishop.
Okay, all right. Well, that's better than 3 or 4 times, I guess. We're always giving Brandon a hard time. He's coming out of his little religious prison that he's got in Tennessee here. So we talk about things that he's not used
Baptist.
to. Yeah, little Bible Belt to the furthest degree. Poor guy.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm from Atlanta, but I live in Western North Carolina, and it's the religion and the churches out there are really the only locals source of socializing.
So you said Western North Carolina. How did you fare with the storm?
I was in the eye of the hurricane when it happened. So my little town was very lucky.
Yeah.
Very, very lucky. I mean,
they got devastated out there.
Yeah. I mean, not far away, things are gone.
Yeah.
But where I am, we were very, very, very lucky.
Wow.
Because it was everywhere around us got hit pretty hard. I happened to be out of town, and then I came home, and it looked like, there was a few branches on my deck and some leaves, but nothing that I could really complain about compared to what other people were having to deal with and the loss and devastation other people were dealing with.
My father-in-law works at the Spruce Pine quartz mines, so he saw a lot of the devastation, and fortunately all their employees are fine, but there was a lot of worry there for a while because nobody was in communication, everything was down, and there were places that were just leveled, as you know. Yeah.
I was invited to a party the other night, and the GPS wasn't working, and so I accidentally went off-roading to find this place, and it was up in some holler in a hill. But I doing that, I was like, no wonder they're sending mule teams in to some of these places to rescue people, because I mean, some of the infrastructure just is very archaic. It's borderline non-existent. And it's the terrain is not like Florida, where they have a lot of hurricanes and a lot of weather and people are sort of used to it. This kind of thing doesn't happen here.
Sure.
So it's, very lucky.
Very lucky. So Father Chris, so if you could, I can't do a screen share without risking everything going crazy, but if you could try to put up to the screen, because you got a pretty good camera, your little clump, the little clump of planets that you've got there. If you got a printout of it,
I'd have to print it out.
Can you do that? Is it possible?
I'll print that out now. I mean, can you let me share my screen?
You can try. I mean, that shouldn't mess up my feed. It's just when I do it, sometimes everything goes wonky.
It's just you've not allowed sharing from other people.
Yeah, I didn't think I could because I think it messes everything up.
Okay, that's it. I'll print it out now.
All right, try to print it out because I'd love to see Aurorah, your opinion on his, because he's got an interesting chart. And
he's a Scorpio rising at 22 degrees. And and he's put the chart in the chat, so I'm not just.
Oh, so you see it? Okay. Then you don't need to share it then. Okay, then as long as she's got it, we don't need to show it on the screen. That's fine.
Okay.
So Scorpio rising, and you have your moon and Uranus are conjunct in the 12th house. So that's a very spiritual place for planets to be, but it's also kind of erratic and emotional, but you're sort of unaware of it. There's like a certain, and some people would say it's almost a karmic place for these two planets to be. But they're so close to your ascendant that it's, I imagine your dreams are sort of active, or completely black. Like you either dream all the time and they're very active, or you're having sort of other experiences when you go to sleep and you're just not aware of it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I went, I go long periods of time with no dreams at all, but when I dream, they're really vivid.
Yeah. I suspect what I would say your higher consciousness is busy at night, when you're not seeing dreams, and you're not experiencing them, and you've got a long to-do list that you're not necessarily supposed to be conscious of. But that's very interesting. Scorpio.
I'm never really off. Like my mind is never off, basically.
Yeah. Well, you have Mercury also conjunct the North Node and your Sun, relatively all conjunct within 10 degrees of each other in Leo, which is definitely communication, being in the spotlight, definitely explains your hair. You have Leo hair for sure. And
a beard.
Yeah.
You should see my son's Leo here. it's all the way up there. Yeah, it's a full
Leo.
mane. Full mane.
Aquarius can also have some pretty good hair depending on like where in the chart they fall, because the Aquarius Leo axis is the same axis.
Yeah. It's funny.
But yeah, so certainly sort of a destiny to be in a position of leadership and to talk to a lot of people, and study. I mean, Leo's in the 9th house, so there's a certain air of theatricality around what you do when you teach or preach, perhaps. Being in the spotlight is something that you feel destined to do and be called for. Leadership's going to be and has been something that you would be driven towards subconsciously or consciously. Also, Jupiter's in the 9th house, so that makes, and it's in the sign of Virgo. So studying, reading a lot, something that is going to take up a lot of your time, I imagine. And so being well read, but you also have Saturn in Virgo, that's in your 10th house. That's responsibility and respect, and certainly integrity for what you do. Saturn in Virgo is about serving other people and potentially people who are less fortunate, being in a place of service to others and being well regarded because of it.
That's the cop part, Father.
Yeah, I was a cop for 10 years before I was a priest.
Yeah, we were both cops. I retired after 26 years. So.
Oh, God.
We're a mess.
I can only imagine the things you've seen. But I bet you could look back at your careers and think about the days that you had that were particularly eventful. And I wonder how many of them would have been around full moons, because full moons tend to turn up the dial of the planetary intensity that we all kind of feel.
I would have to look, but I had a real bad motorcycle accident and I was told that it happened on a full moon, but I would have to go back and look for sure.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
Let's talk about the lunar cycle, because that's a big part of your methodology as well, Aurora, I saw. So how does the phases of the moon affect the various aspects of the chart, I guess?
Oh, well, I mean, like, I think what I just said kind of puts it in a nutshell pretty well. new moons are all about new beginnings. It's a good time to plant intentions or set intentions, set goals for yourself. Full moons are a time of culmination, but they also just tend to turn up the dial on, like the volume knob on what is going on energetically with the planets. So we have a full moon this Thursday. Is the biggest super moon of the year. And so I think we're all going to feel this one more so than most full moons. And there's some pretty tough transits happening right around this full moon as well, which can, I mean, people have been reaching out and asking if Mercury is in Gatorade, which it's not.
Damn Gatorade.
We've been feeling it. I mean, I have to say, I mean, the energy out there the last few weeks has been rough energy. And so
it's made me cranky.
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I've been snapping off when I shouldn't be.
Well, but if you know that about, if you know when your chart is also, if you've got a lot of stuff in Cancer, you've potentially been having Pluto opposing stuff as it's moved through Capricorn, which would be a lot of change. And that so Pluto has been in Capricorn for about 20 years. Well, since 2008 is when he moved into Capricorn. But there would have been a lot of profound changes, I mean, for everybody in that period of time, but things that might have felt more personal and foundational to you, specifically because you had so many planets in Cancer being opposed by.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I basically stopped between 2008 and 2010 was my transition period from being a policeman to being a clergyman.
Okay. Let's see. Well,
my last 2 years in the police and my first year as a deacon and then a priest. Yeah.
Yeah. You have your Neptune is in Sagittarius, which is again the sign of religion in the first house. So there's always
Mine is too.
That made sense to me.
My Neptune's in Sag too.
It's funny because I didn't grow up religious at all. You know, I found it when I basically, was 16, 17 is when I started asking my own questions about that. I wasn't indoctrinated at all. And so, yeah, it's interesting that would be the case.
Well, around the time of 16, 17 it's a Saturn
97.
opposition. So Saturn would have been in Pisces and Aries, opposing your natal Saturn at 25 degrees of Virgo. So it would have been in your fourth house of third or fourth house. Yeah, the house of questions and communication, but also at home. There could have been some changes shifting around that time period for you too. Back then. But yeah, I mean, I think to go back to the question of lunar cycles, we get 12 full moons or 12 to 13 full moons and new moons every year, which gives us a chance to go through the phases of the house of the astrology chart. And so if you know which house that full moon is falling in, you can kind of say, okay, well, let's take new moons, for example. We've got a new moon in the first house. That's the house of self and identity. It's a good time to make changes in terms of your routines, your health, the things that sort of define your outward appearance, update your appearance, your wardrobe, that kind of stuff. But give yourself 6 months until the full moon happens in that house to really reap the benefits and for people to start noticing an external development and change. And so that's kind of how I work in terms of using those cycles to set goals. And if you know that, say, transiting Saturn is in that first house, those changes can be much more long-lived because it takes Saturn 30 years to go through the whole chart again. So making changes while Saturn's in the first house, for example, can lead to changes that last for a good 30 years.
What about blue moons and solar eclipses? How does that factor into your model?
Good question.
Yeah, well, eclipses are interesting. So we just lived through eclipse season. When you were saying the energy was making you cranky and it's been intense. I would be willing to wager that there was some intensity that we were all feeling from those eclipses happening. The eclipse cycle has been on the Libra Aries axis for the last 18 months or so. Next year, the eclipse cycle will switch from Libra Aries into Virgo Pisces energy. So it'll be a very different set of circumstances that we're all kind of coping with. But eclipses tend to act as destiny portals in some way. When an eclipse hits or touches someone's personal planet, almost every single time, there is some sort of transformation or dramatic, unexpected event that feels somewhat fated that happens. And if you can understand the planets around it and the house and that person's particular chart, usually in hindsight, it all makes perfect sense. But it's almost something nobody sees coming.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a total solar eclipse in person?
In person, not yet.
It is probably one of the most spiritual experiences I've ever had that can be attained in nature, you know, in a calculated kind of way, instead of like, I'm not talking about like having a vision. This is something that you can plan for. I mean, it was so profound. I didn't see this last one. We were going to go. The weather didn't look like it was going to cooperate to travel to it. So we decided to just kind of catch the edge of it here in Atlanta, where we got to see, it was a partial, it was like 80% or something. And it got dark, but not like dark like it does with a real total eclipse. And then, we went to the one that came through Tennessee a few years back, and that was the first time I ever seen it. It was truly remarkable, to the point that we said we got to do this again. We actually are flying to Spain. Well, we're actually flying to the UK and then going to Spain to watch the next one, and it's going to actually be partially over the Atlantic, partially over the Mediterranean Sea. So we're going to be on a ship. And it be in the path of totality to see it again. It was that profound. And it does. It has. I mean, I never looked at my chart to see how it's affecting me personally, to see what, you know, the sun is doing in my chart. But I can tell you that it felt like looking into the face of God. It was truly that remarkable.
I'm not really surprised that you say that, because the sun is the source of all energy and life on this planet and our solar system. And so it really is sort of the engine that fuels everything on some level. So I'm not terribly surprised to hear that. It is a goal of mine. I was looking at where the eclipses fall, and there's one in Egypt.
Yes.
In 2027, and I think I want to plan to go to that one.
That was one of the ones we looked at, but there's one that's a little bit closer sooner. So we're doing the one off of Spain, the coast of Spain.
So the one I saw was in Manchester 1 week before my 19th birthday. So it was 1999.
Well, it's like
1999.
You take, once it reaches totality, and we try to go to the center point, so you get the most time in the darkness. That's when you can take the glasses off and look straight at it. And when you see all of those, the solar rays just coming off of this black void, it's just so remarkable. And then when you really consider just how remarkable it is from an astronomical point of view, forgetting just astrology for a minute, just astronomically, the fact that we are just the right distance from the moon is just the right distance from us and the right distance from the sun to be able to produce that totality on the planet. That in itself is a remarkable thing, because the moon is moving away from us, and there will be a time on this planet where solar eclipses can never happen again. So it's really kind of a sacred thing to experience. And
well, Danielle said in the chat then, because Danielle's also in England, and she talks about it It is so weird because it was the same when I saw mine. It's the same one, 1999.
Yeah.
But it was a clear day, which is unusual enough in Manchester. If you've lived in England, you'd know that, Aurora. And so it was a clear day, and then all of a sudden, and it's summer, right? So and all of a sudden it gets colder. But the thing that really I remember the most, she's mentioned, which is the effect on the birds. The birds just
go crazy,
silent. They go crazy and then silent.
And then the bugs start going crazy around
bugs,
here.
yeah. Crickets go quiet. Yeah.
It's instant. It's instant. I have a YouTube video that I've showed. It's not public. I guess I could make it public, but it was, I videotaped the entire thing from beginning to end. And just basically, I mean, I couldn't get a good shot of it. So you can't see it, but you can see what everyone's doing looking at it. And you can see, I mean, it becomes like, really it becomes dusk, like dark dusk, like the point right before the sun goes down for good. And it's so quick and it's so instant. It's like all of a sudden it is like you hear the birds, everyone, they're chirping, everything's normal, but you can tell the animals can sense that something's going strange because the light does change, and it does change dramatically over the course of about an hour. And then all of a sudden it goes dark. That's when it just like the last shred of light, and then it's pitch dark, and then the birds go completely silent, and then all the bugs just immediately start up. And it's a really interesting dynamic. And then as soon as you come out on the other end, it's the opposite effect. All the bugs all of a sudden go silent, like what the hell's going on? And then the birds start singing again. It's really interesting. I really recommend, if you've never seen, anybody out there in the audience, if you've never seen a solar eclipse, whether you're into astrology or not, it's something that everybody should get a chance to see. It's worth the trip. It's worth the traffic at least once in your life to see it. It's so remarkable. I want to ask you also, Aurora, about retrogrades in the outer planets. I mean, we know they have dramatic effects in the inner planets. Mercury, of course, even if you've never looked at an astrological chart or looked at your horoscope, you probably know about Mercury retrograde. People talk about it in the office. But what about for the outer planets?
I know nothing about it. Could you
retrograde, I mean, she can probably describe it better, but basically it's from our vantage point on Earth, it looks as if the planet's going the opposite direction for a period of time. It's not really doing that, but it looks that way. So as far as the chart's concerned, it looks like it's going in reverse. When it does that, it's like the reversal of the energy. So for Mercury, the planet of communication and intellect and the mind, it's like people have a harder time communicating. Equipment has a harder time working because it's all being affected adversely by the reversal of that energy. It's not free flowing. But I've always wondered what your thoughts are tonight on, the whole time I've been talking with you, I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on the retrogrades for the outer planets?
Well, they happen a lot more frequently and for longer periods of time than the smaller, faster moving inner planets. Yeah. But almost every planet aside from the moon and the sun go retrograde at some point. So it's not unusual, but I think what it does is it gives those planets a chance to sort of revise things. Because I think of the planets sort of as people with personalities, and when they speed up, they tend to miss something or leave something behind. And so when they go retrograde, it gives them the opportunity to maybe pick something back up that they meant to get to, but just sort of fell off the list because they were rushed away too quickly. But also, I think it gives us a chance to work things out for ourselves. It makes us a little bit more internalized and introspective than when an outer planet is direct. I think there's a lot more energy spent on outward directed actions than internalization and self-reflection and personal inner growth that might seem slow and beneath the surface and sort of quiet, but that quiet work has big implications once that work is complete down the road. And when that planet goes direct again and then passes that shadow phase and moves on, then that's when we see the evidence of that inner work that has taken place.
Fascinating. My wife and I were married in a Buddhist Dharma center. I can't talk tonight. Dharma center by a Buddhist nun. And this was before, I had obviously entered, or I actually was a seminary and I left. I became a Buddhist. I got married, then came back to the church many years later. But in that Buddhist period of time, that's when I was studying astrology far more closely. And so when I ran our charts, one of the things I did was look for the most favorable transit for the wedding, to pick the wedding date. I even did it right down to like the minute. So I told fortunately it was a Buddhist nun and not a Catholic priest, because he probably would have thought it was nuts. But the Buddhist nun kind of understood that this might, we respect this, we can understand the values of this. So I told her, I said, so we are going to have to wait until we have to make sure that we don't exchange vows until this exact time. So we need to kind of arrange the ceremony so that we're coming to the vow exchange point where you do that and then we say I do at that point, because we want to say I do exactly at, I don't remember exactly what the time was anymore, but it was the most astrologically favorable time for a long lasting, intimate, close relationship that would be at the least amount of risk for any kind of failure. And that's what I was looking for. So I found a perfect, it was like crazy. The year we wanted to get married, it was only within a few months I found a perfect transit for it. So I said, this is it. This is the one. This is the date. So she planned it very cautiously. But the funniest thing is that we got to the ceremony, and for some reason, I don't know, she just talked faster for the real one than the rehearsal. And we ended up with like 30 minutes before time. And so she was brilliant. She just said, okay, now we're going to do a 30-minute meditation. Nobody knew what was going on there, but they're like, hey, it's Buddhist. We've never seen a Buddhist ceremony before, so maybe this is what they do. So nobody knew anything, but it worked. And so she kept looking at her clock, and then she called us out with, she had a little bell there, and she called us out of our little meditation, and we exchanged vows and said, I do exactly at the time I said. And I have to say, it's been a very happy marriage. I mean, we're going on 23 years here, so it's worked. If you use astrology the correct way, it can definitely make your life better. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I think that's a wonderful and honestly a beautiful ritual in a way. You get this sort of reflective, quiet, somber period to put your intentions into this lifelong commitment you're making.
It sort of seemed like destiny was involved in that, because like we said, we rehearsed it at least twice, and we were right on time for both rehearsals. But for some reason, when the real one came, we got through it too quick. But it worked out. It was great. It was a wonderful. Everyone kind of remembered it favorably, I think. And then we went and had a fantastic meal at one of our favorite Chinese restaurants. They made us venison. It was wonderful. But yeah, it was a great ceremony, and it definitely, I could feel the benefits of utilizing those transits, that energy to put something positive into the decision that we were making that was for life,
Oh yeah. I mean, energy is real, and so are the intentions with which we use the energy. So I think that is an incredibly fortuitous blessing that you were gifted with that extra 30 minutes to sort of channel the best of intentions. And was everybody in your audience also meditating? Like, is it a group meditation or?
Well, they were there. I'm not sure they knew what to do because none of them were Buddhists. We were the only ones. Even the best man and the maid of honor were not Buddhists. So everyone was kind of like looking around like, I'm not sure what we're doing here, but okay, let's just go with it. But at that point in my life, I was meditating 5-6 hours a day. If I could do more, I would have, so I was very proficient in it. And I had taught my wife, or my fiance at the time, a lot about it. And so we were fine, but I guess you could start hearing the shuffling of feet and stuff, and people were getting a little bit like, what's going on? It's taking a long time.
It doesn't matter.
Aurora, there was a there was a comment that Marina made in the group chat when you mentioned the 20th of April next year being a particular. I'm just interested in. I can't remember exactly what you said about that time, but are you aware that that's the date of Easter Sunday next year? And it's also one of the occasions where Easter Sunday is celebrated by the Orthodox and the Western Church,
which is rare. That does not does not happen very often. It only happens.
That is really odd.
So there you go.
I wonder whether that's the cause of the energy spike. I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to double check to make sure that date is correct. Yes, yeah. I mean, Neptune is at 0 degrees, 46 minutes on April 20th next year.
Wow.
But let me see. It might actually, when he moves in, it might actually be a little bit sooner than that. Let me give you the exact date. I'm sorry. That was off the top of my head. I do apologize. But it will be March 29th is when it moves from Pisces, and then April 1st is the day that we get the first degree of Neptune in Aries. But he will still be at 0 degrees. It will just be a few minutes past 0 degrees. But yeah, that April next year, April 1st, also April Fool's Day, I believe. So there could be that, what I was saying earlier about things that have to do with misinformation. There could be events that are misconstrued that day, potentially, because of April Fool's Day. I think things that are taken out of context or should be taken out of context could snowball. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting for sure. Absolutely. It will definitely be a mood shift that we'll feel collectively.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple more minutes here, so I'd like to give you a chance to maybe tell everybody how they can reach out to you. It sounds like you do you take you do clients and readings and stuff like that.
Yes, I have clients. I also do a podcast that comes out every new and full moon where I talk about astrology. The show is called Blood Moon Milk, and you can find me over at bloodmoonmilk.com, all just one word. And if you would like a session, you can book one or check out there. I'll email you. We'll set up a Zoom session. I'll record it. You can watch it over and over and over again, and I'll send you your personalized transits along with your chart, and we can talk about whatever themes come to mind that you would like help with exploring. I like to see people quarterly, 4 times a year, because that gives the planets a chance to move and people to start to see results and things play out. I also write the Daily Dose, which is a very affordable daily email newsletter I send out Monday through Friday. Friday's a weekend edition. It has Friday, Saturday, Sunday in it. And that's just $7 a month. I think of it as buying me a nice cup of coffee to get my insights for what's going to happen that day.
That's fantastic. And what a wonderful way that there's all these options that people can get your wisdom. And I want to just say, I'm just reading quickly some of the comments in the various chats, and you have been, people really enjoyed this. They really enjoyed you coming on the show, and hopefully some of them will actually reach out to you and utilize some of your services. I think that would be brilliant. And we would love to have you back on the show too, if you're willing.
Yeah,
I feel like I owe you a coffee as well.
Well, I'll be in England in December, so maybe I'll see you. I'm going to
maybe I'll be there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you again. And so Brandon will be in touch with you to schedule you again, Aurorah, but I want to just personally thank you so much for coming on the show. I know it can sometimes be a little bit confusing and daunting when a church reaches out to you and says, we'd like you to talk about astrology. I'm sure you probably thought for a minute, maybe I'm being set up, because I know I've been set up on shows before when people ask me to talk about exorcisms and religion. And it's like, yeah, sure. You want me, you're just here to create problems. So I appreciate you trusting us, and we have thoroughly enjoyed your presence here. So thank you so much. And we can't wait to do it again.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Jamie, Brandon, Father Chris, thank you also for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everybody. Fascinating subject.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, this has been great. There's just the one thing I like about astrology is there's no limit to how far you can go talking about it. You'll never run out of things to discuss with it. And one of the things I like about astrologers is they tend to be very down-to-earth people. I mean, you can talk about mediums, and they're fun, and psychics are fun, but sometimes they can be really spacey. Astrologers are really far more down-to-earth, and I like that about them. So it's really great to see that side of metaphysics, Both sides.
All
are
the
fun, I guess.
details.
Always it is. I want to thank everybody out there also for joining us tonight. I want to thank our moderators and, of course, this wonderful audience of spiritual seekers and people that are willing to go out there and learn something about the universe. Look, you don't have to fear it. I know there was someone on Instagram that was talking about how you're afraid of astrology now because you were involved in some hippie that did the occult and now you had an attachment or some kind of demonic possession or something. Look, it's your fear that's going to make that worse, okay? So the more you fear things like astrology, the more it's going to be worse. So get away from the fear. Take back your empowerment. Astrology is one of the ways you can do that. I think we've demonstrated that tonight, or at least showed you some of the examples for how we ourselves have done it. I am a living example of that, and that's why I had this show, and I want to continue to do shows on astrology, maybe once a season. That would be great if she has the time. So we'll find out. Brandon will reach out to her. I want to thank everyone again. We'll be back next week with Brandon Milam talking about the devil, but until then, we'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.